deep underground, an ancient Egyptian tomb from the time of Ramses the Great. This bricked-up entrance has been undisturbed for nearly 3,000 years until now.
Are we going to be able to get in, yes? Oh my God. It is dark. It looks very, very deep.
What's revealed is a surprise to even the most experienced archaeologist.
Ooh la la. Yes. Ooh, beautiful. My God.
Ramses II, known as Ramses the Great, was one of the most powerful and successful rulers of the ancient world. He reigned for 66 years, expanded Egypt's borders, and built more monuments and temples than any other pharaoh. How did he become such a mighty king and build a legacy that has lasted 3 millennia? Today, across Egypt, archaeologists are digging up evidence as they attempt to uncover the secrets of Ramses' rise to power. Most ancient Egyptians never saw Ramses the Great in the flesh, but his image was everywhere. To investigate how Ramses made his presence felt across his empire, American hieroglyphs expert and vintage clothes collector Colleen Darnell ventures to one of his most impressive achievements, Karnak Temple.
The sheer scale of this temple is just overwhelming. This is one of the most impressive spaces in the world. You can read all the numbers, how high the columns are, how many they are. And I especially love the color on the ceilings. You have to stand here in order to appreciate its magnificence.
When Ramses came to power, Karnak was already a temple complex the size of 75 football fields and held a sacred lake larger than 7 Olympic swimming pools. One temple, called the Temple of Amun-Ra, was big enough to hold 10 Gothic cathedrals within its walls. But Ramses wanted more. So he completed a masterpiece begun by his father, a great hypostyle hall. It's one of the largest religious rooms ever built. So what can this sacred temple reveal about what made Ramses such a powerful and memorable leader? Around 30 different pharaohs helped build Karnak, over 1,500 years. But the writing on the temple walls tells a different story.
There's one name I see more than any other, and that is Ramses. This is the cartouche of Ramses II. We see it again all around this column. We see it on this column, pretty confidently. Nearly every column in this side of the hypostyle hall has multiple examples of the name of Ramses II.
134 sandstone columns tower up to 66 feet high. Recent analysis shows every single one is inscribed with Ramses' name and stories of his life. He didn't just help build the most iconic room in the temple, he made sure everybody knew it. But many of Egypt's kings built big monuments. Colleen wants to see what else Ramses did to make his reign so special. Clues to his epic achievements are carved into the temple walls.
This wall is just amazing. It's filled with the military victories of Ramses II. We have him fighting in a chariot, then he's bringing his captives in and presenting them to the god Amun, the god here at Karnak Temple. And over here, he's smiting foes from the 4 corners of the world. He truly wanted to be known as a warrior pharaoh.
As a young prince, Ramses accompanied his father Seti I on military campaigns, gaining experience of leadership in war. He became king while still a teenager and took command of the Egyptian military, an army of 100,000 men. He personally led them onto the battlefield against the Hittite Empire of Kadesh and returned home proclaiming victory. But his campaigns continued throughout his long reign as he expanded and strengthened Egypt's control, earning a fearsome reputation as a mighty warrior king.
This is an incredible scene. We see Ramses in his chariot, and he's pulling an enemy off of his own chariot and is about to pierce him with a spear. And all this is taking place outside of a Syrian city. So this shows Ramses extending the boundaries of Egypt. Ramses, like other pharaohs, put his military victories on temple walls because it was a way of showing the triumph of Egypt, the triumph of order over chaos represented by foreigners.
These scenes, together with other ancient evidence, suggest Ramses really did fight alongside his men, unlike many pharaohs who made similar boasts. His bravery and tactical skill were central to his rise to power. But is there more to Ramses' rule than just military might? In Luxor's Deir el-Bahari, where Ramses buried many of his nobles at the sprawling tomb complex of As-Sasif, Egyptian archaeologist Fatih Yassin wants to find out why they chose this specific location for their necropolis and what it can reveal about Ramses' long reign.
We have here a lot of temples, thousands of tombs.
Fatih doesn't just run this dig. He oversees every antiquity site on Luxor's West Bank and has done for 30 years.
My job is very busy, but for us it is exciting work. Why? Because maybe we find here, add for the Egyptology more information for the ancient history.
The location of these burials is very unusual and mysterious. On Luxor's West Bank, ancient Egyptian elites mostly buried their dead high up on hillsides so people would look up to them, even in death. But here, the tombs are right on the valley floor.
Why choose to locate their tombs in this area? What's the importance of this area?
Last season, Fatih and his team discovered the beautifully decorated cartonnage of an elite. He thinks there's an important undiscovered tomb nearby. It could contain priceless treasure and inscriptions about the tomb owner that might help explain the tomb's strange location. Starting from a simple mud brick wall in the sand, Fatih's excavations reveal the outline of a huge tomb. Now, Fatih and his team need to find the tomb's underground doorway.
It is very exciting for us to see this entrance, but what behind the entrance, we don't know yet.
Workers painstakingly remove debris from the tomb's mud brick outline on ground level.
We are working under nearly 40 degrees. It is hot.
Despite the 104-degree Fahrenheit conditions, they work quickly to reveal a 65-foot-long corridor, but have no idea how deep it is. It could take weeks to reach bedrock and the tomb's underground entrance.
Our concentration now is to recognize what is behind the debris. It is a very exciting moment for us.
Fatih and his team have many tons of sand to shift, but they keep an eye out for any clues hidden in the dust.
Part from Ushabti. It is very good indication because it means we are working in the right position to find the entrance of the tomb.
At the Saqqara necropolis on the outskirts of Cairo, in front of the world's oldest pyramid, Egyptian archaeologist Ola El Aguizi is exploring the tombs of Ramses' generals.
I love what I'm doing. I really love it.
To rule an expanding empire, you need loyal soldiers. And Ola hopes to find out how Ramses rewarded those who supported his rise to power.
This is a family burial, the whole area. It's clear that they're all related. It's just a real puzzle.
Grandmother Ola came to archaeology 50 years ago through her love of hieroglyphics. She spent the last 15 years exploring these ancient tombs, mostly with the same trusty team of workers.
Every day we come here, we have a surprise. We have something new to find.
This season, Ola's excavating an impressive temple tomb. It belongs to a senior general called Yorhi.
Yorhi was known to be a very important general in the army of Ramses II. That's why I'm very keen on this excavation of this tomb this year.
Archaeologists believe Yorhi and his family came from Syria, traveling to Egypt for a better life. Yorhi was quickly accepted into Egyptian society, serving as a general to Ramses' father, Seti I, then later as right-hand man to Ramses himself, fighting at the pharaoh's side and leading the army. When Yorhi died, he was buried in a large tomb of classically Egyptian design. So how did Ramses reward those who contributed most to his success? To find out, Ola's team searches an area on the south of the site in the hope of uncovering more about Ramses' generals and the mysterious foreigner Yorhi, who Ramses trusted enough to let him lead his army. On the dig, Ola's hard work eventually pays off. As the team excavates Yorhi's tomb, they discover a shaft carved 26 feet deep into the rocks. It leads to a small antechamber from which another shaft drops 39 feet down to what must be Yorhi's burial chamber. The team finds it empty, no sign of grave goods, coffins, or mummies. But then they discover something extremely promising higher up. The wall of the first antechamber looks like it's been ripped up in ancient times. What could lie hidden behind it?
I need to know every part of the tomb, and if there are later burials also, I need to know.
Today, Ola will go inside the antechamber for the first time. She must ascend a perilous 26-foot deep shaft the old-fashioned way, with a wooden winch operated by hand.
See how strong they are.
The workers must carefully lower her down in a bucket.
I'm used to that, and I like it. Oh la la.
Ola descends down the long, dark shaft into a partly unexplored tomb. If anything goes wrong with the hand winch supporting the bucket, the fall could kill her.
Oh la la. Fantastic.
The tomb belongs to one of Ramses' most senior generals, a man named Yorhi. Ola wants to investigate how this foreigner became Ramses' head general. She thinks this could reveal how the generals helped Ramses to become the most powerful pharaoh of all time, and how Ramses rewarded them in return. Today, she hopes to enter a new part of the tomb for the first time in nearly 3 millennia, but its entrance is blocked up. Ola believes ancient workers left the loose bricks simply to hold up the fragile ceiling. Her team must remove the blocks carefully. The ancient ceiling above them could easily collapse.
Are we going to be able to get in, yes? Ooh.
With the small space clear, Ola can finally look inside.
Oh my God. Oh la la. Ooh. There are lots of other galleries inside. It's a maze. It looks very, very deep.
Behind the wall is a tomb. It's much bigger than they first thought, and it's full of debris. It's a potential treasure trove of items that could reveal vital information about General Yorhi.
It might have some burials hidden inside. I'm optimistic. I will find lots of things. لا 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 مش مشكلة لا 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 لا.
But it's pitch black, and dangerous shafts could lie hidden below the sand.
They're getting the lamp which is in the other shaft so that we can take it with us inside. That's Nader, my assistant. He's just checking to see, because since it's the first time, he wants to be sure that we can go in safely. Okay?
Yes,
it is safe, yeah, Nader?
very safe.
Okay. So I am going to enter now.
Once inside, Ola discovers an astonishing number of funerary alabaster jars. These contain mummified food and wine for the deceased to live on in the afterlife.
That's fantastic. That shows that this is a rich burial, yes. Oh, yes, show me.
More tunnels lead off from the main chamber.
Oh, you see? Look inside. There is still another passage here.
It's not just a tomb, it's a catacomb with half a dozen tombs connected together.
Come.
A once-in-a-decade find.
My God. Remains of a skeleton with the skull. Oh my God.
In Luxor's Deir el-Bahri, at the Asasif Acropolis, Fatty's excavating a 66-foot-long entrance corridor of an ancient tomb. The area is rich with the burials of Ramses' nobles, and Fatty wants to know what these tombs reveal about Ramses' reign as pharaoh. To find out, Fatty hopes to solve the mystery of why tomb owners chose this site on the valley floor. They've now reached nearly 10 feet below ground level at the end of the corridor. As he searches for the tomb's entrance, he uncovers clues in the debris.
Wow. This pottery is very nice. We will keep this pottery and we will take it for conservation area.
As Fatty's team gets close to what they hope is the tomb entrance, they discover funerary treasures that prove they are on the right track.
Yeah, wow. It is Ushaptis, mostly complete one, representing man standing in the same position like this.
Ancient Egyptians believed these tiny figures, called shaptis, would come to life and serve the tomb's occupant in the afterlife.
It is very good. Nice one.
As the team excavates, the sandy rock debris changes to smooth white limestone.
Wow.
The top of the tomb's entrance door.
It's a very exciting moment for us.
Fatty hopes the tomb will hold clues, such as inscriptions, that reveal why the tomb owner chose such a low-lying site, when most tombs for the elite are in the hillsides that surround an acropolis. The team must work quickly in the scorching heat to remove the rocks blocking the entrance.
Very hot.
In this low-lying valley, temperatures can reach up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Luckily for Fatty, there's not long to go.
We will reach the entrance for the first time. So we are very proud now.
With the first limestone blocks removed, Fatty can finally look inside.
Wow.
In In Luxor's Karnak Temple, Colleen is hunting for clues that explain Ramses' rise to power. Ramses was a mighty warrior and general who fought in many campaigns and expanded Egypt's borders to the east and south. But the temple walls suggest that's not the only reason he became so powerful.
This is a remarkable document. It's the actual text to a peace treaty.
This 3,300-year-old wall holds 38 lines of hieroglyphic inscriptions that lay out in detail the world's first peace treaty, an unprecedented promise of alliance between Ramses and his mortal enemies, the Hittites.
It's amazing to see the text of an actual treaty. This is the document that two great powers signed, Egypt on one hand and the Hittites on the other.
This proves that Ramses didn't just fight wars, he ended them too. Peace allowed Egypt to prosper and for Ramses to get richer and more powerful.
This tells us how neither the Hittites nor the Egyptians could attack one another, and if they were attacked by a third party, they would come to their allies' aid.
The Egyptian-Hittite peace treaty, or the Treaty of Kadesh, meant Ramses could finally end his 20-year war with the Hittites.
Wars are quite costly, so by having peace, Ramses is guaranteeing stability and prosperity in his reign.
This allowed Ramses to focus on gathering wealth and building temples and monuments that celebrated his mighty achievements.
A lot of pharaohs, including Ramses, used propaganda. But in the case of the peace treaty, these are real terms with a real foreign king. So this shows Ramses wanted everyone to know that he was a great diplomat.
Ramses demonstrated himself to be the ultimate king, and his choice of Karnak to proclaim as such was no accident.
I think Ramses is showing the peace treaty here at Karnak precisely to contrast with his military exploits. He does what he needs to do to preserve order on behalf of Egypt's gods.
Ramses was a warrior king and a diplomat who ruled over an extraordinary period of peace and prosperity. But that still doesn't explain how he became so powerful that we're still repeating his name 3,000 years later. At the historic Egyptian Museum in Cairo, French archaeologist Simon Connor and Egyptian conservator Eid Murta are investigating how he wielded power across his kingdom using ancient propaganda.
Here, Ramses, here also Ramses.
Ramses built thousands of statues and placed them strategically across Egypt. Most are now in museums, and around 90 of them are here in Cairo. Some of them have never been studied up close.
Being able to almost touch them, to be a few centimeters away from their faces, it's quite emotional actually.
Simon and Eid think they might be hiding secrets in plain sight. By studying the details of the stonework, they hope to discover how Ramses used his statues to increase his power. Colossal statues of pharaohs were a common sight for ancient Egyptians, with temples, cities, and palaces guarded by these giant granite figures. Master sculptors worked on them for months with stone tools, refining the detail with copper chisels, and finally polishing them to a smooth finish with sand. They were more than just works of art. They were magical avatars that allowed the pharaohs to connect with their subjects. Once the pharaoh's name was carved onto it, the statue was activated and became a bearer of the king's soul. The team immediately spots some surprising evidence that this Ramses statue was altered after it was first carved.
So here we can see very quickly the traces of modification. You see around the ears, here under the arches of the eyebrows, under the eyes. Here the mouth has been modified, the corners have been dug, the ears have been changed. It bears very clear traces of modification, of recarving.
Although the name on the statue is Ramses II, could it have started out as someone else's name? To find out, Simon and Eid need to compare the details with an original, unaltered Ramses statue to see what his statues really looked like. Outside the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, Simon and Eid spot a stunning statue carved from granite. They search for clues that it's a genuine statue of Ramses the Great.
The way the king holding two standards completely started with Ramses.
Clearly, this statue was made during his own reign for himself.
This statue seems to be looking right at them.
The eyes are looking down. Ramses looks at the people.
Unlike pharaohs gone before, whose eyes looked to the horizon, Ramses used his statues to connect with his people. His direct eye contact is a powerful way to instill awe. Simon and Eid return inside to the museum to compare their findings with the seemingly modified Ramses statue. Sure enough, it has Ramses' eyeline.
The sculptors cut under the eye. They cut here on the eyelid. The idea was to produce a heavy upper eyelid.
The eyelid and downward eyeline is a later modification. Incredibly, an unmodified version of this exact same statue exists in another museum. This clearly shows that the eyes would have looked straight ahead when first carved. Simon and Eid spot more evidence.
Here we see traces of modification of the feature of the eyebrows, enough to create the arches of the eyebrows. So here, the sculptor wanted this part to protrude.
Even the cobra on the crown was recut to the style of Ramses' 19th dynasty snake.
They wanted the snake to have this double loop on either side of the hook. And so when statues have to be Ramesized, we have to produce these little features.
It's powerful evidence that Ramses altered an older statue to look like one of his.
This statue clearly was not Ramses originally, it was another king.
So if this isn't Ramses, who is it?
So you have an alternation between one thick stripes and two thin. One thick, two thin, one thick, two thin. This detail is typical of the 12th dynasty, so around 600 years before the reign of Ramses.
They can't tell exactly which pharaoh the statue was made for originally, but it's clear evidence that Ramses modified older statues to proclaim his power across Egypt quickly.
The intention was really to choose specific statues, beautiful ones, big ones, of prestigious ancestors, to re-embody them.
Ramses deliberately left evidence of the former kings in the statues. He wasn't trying to steal their identities. He was using the reputation of his most illustrious ancestors to exert and increase his own power.
They had an aura, they had a prestige. And the idea was to show that they were ancient, but that he was the new them.
Recent evidence reveals that nearly 1/4 of Ramses' statues originally belonged to other pharaohs. Ramses simply recarved them, claiming them as his own. But further investigation of some statues proves tricky because of ancient damage done to them.
Two things mostly are missing: the head of the Uranus, and here the nose. And it has been completely erased, really carefully chipped off. So the statue is broken, and it's in 90% of cases in Egyptian statues, all of them were intentionally chipped off, cut off.
Ramses used this statue and others as his magical avatar, but once no longer ruler, his statues needed to be deactivated.
You need to remove the magic from the object by killing it. So you remove the nose, you remove the Uranus, he's not royal anymore. He's just a piece of stone.
Today, Ramses' statues help piece together the mighty pharaoh's rule and act as vital evidence for how he used them to become the greatest ruler of ancient Egypt. In Luxor's Deir el-Bahari, in a vast necropolis full of Ramses' nobles' tombs, Fadi's on the brink of a new discovery, an unopened tomb hidden for thousands of years.
Wow. Here in the top of the door, it is quite dark, full of debris.
Fadi believes this tomb will provide clues as to why tomb owners chose this site and reveal information about Ramses' prosperous reign as pharaoh. But debris is blocking the entrance.
We can't see any kind of decoration inside. Too much debris. We have to arrive to the bedrock of the door before enter. We have to follow the nature of the debris layer by layer. At least 2 meters to go.
For several days, the team hauls tons of sand and soil under the burning sun. But finally, they uncover the full entrance.
I'm waiting 1 month to enter, so it is very special moment. Now I can go inside. Wow. It is a huge tomb, full of debris. Okay, the ceiling is not in good condition.
In Luxor's Deir el-Bahari, in a necropolis used by Ramses' nobles, Fatih enters a tomb for the first time. He wants to know why elites chose this low-lying site for their necropolis and what that might reveal about Ramses' reign. He's looking for inscriptions, but the room's 25 by 12-foot walls are bare.
I cannot see an inscription.
Now he must launch a painstaking search of the debris to look for other kinds of evidence that could provide clues as to why the nobles of Ramses the Great chose to bury their dead here.
I see some pottery here, some baskets also. Wow. It is so beautiful because it is not common to find the complete jar. Hopefully, this kind of pottery helps us also for information why the tomb owner located his tomb here. I see another thing here also. Wow. Looks like nice baskets, and it is great because in good condition.
The ancient items are perfectly preserved, but they will start to degrade in the open air. Fatih takes them straight to the conservation lab for further study.
Great. Just he used the air to be sure there is no any more dust inside it. Try to strengthen it with another liquid material and we can open it.
The stunning basket and pot are in such great condition, it's unlikely these are burial goods placed next to the deceased in the burial chamber. They're rather offerings by family members, placed in mourning at the tomb's entrance as part of an ancient festival specific to this area.
Could be for the beautiful festival of the valley. This basket could be used for food, for fruits.
Every year, on the first new moon of May, crowds gathered at Karnak Temple with offerings of food and masses of flowers. They processed behind a boat carrying the image of the god Amun and crossed the Nile to the West Bank, land of the dead. The procession passed the temples of the kings, and then they made their way to the temple of Hatshepsut. Families broke away to visit the tombs of their relatives, where they made offerings of food and flowers and feasted through the night with the dead. Fatih's finds suggest that nobles chose this site for their burial because of its excellent location for the beautiful festival of the valley. These tombs would have been the last stop before the Hatshepsut temple, so it was prime real estate to receive offerings.
In that case, if their tombs here, it means they will get more offering, more flowers, more food, more drink. The deceased, he will enjoy and he will cheer for the beautiful festival of the valley. I'm so happy because now we know why they chose this area.
Ramses' 66-year reign was incredibly prosperous, so he could afford to be generous with his subjects. He continues the beautiful festival of the valley, along with dozens of other festivals, even organizing an annual 24-day feast, making him popular with the masses and increasing his power. For Fatih and his team, it's been a very successful dig, and they hope this will just be the start of their discoveries here.
We will continue our work for the rest of the tomb.
In Saqqara, Ola is exploring a hidden chamber in the tomb of one of Ramses' military commanders, General Yorhi. She hopes to uncover how these generals helped his rise to power and how he rewarded them in return. But the tomb is a mess of artifacts buried under rubble, with skeletons scattered throughout. It's a clear sign to Ola that robbers looted this tomb thousands of years ago. Ola makes a start on the funerary items the robbers left behind.
We have a puzzle everywhere. Sometimes we find many fragments of the same jar. We have to put them together.
One jar in particular stands out.
You see this here? It is a crown with horns and sun disk here. This is a deity, so I mean maybe Hathor.
The stunning pot shows Hathor, the goddess of love, who takes the form of a cow, but no information about Yorhi. Something else catches Ola's eye.
Ooh, 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 ooh! Beautiful! My God!
Ola has made a major discovery. She hopes it will provide clues as to how Ramses' generals helped his rise to power and how he rewarded them in return.
This is the first time we have something so clear. This is the head of one of the canopic jars. It's beautiful. You see the wig, the ears. Oh my God.
This canopic jar head is part of the funerary goods buried in the tomb of Ramses' head general named Yorhi. They hold the mummy's vital organs so they can live again and reuse them in the afterlife.
So beautiful. Oof. And the cheek is so smooth. Finding this is like a treasure also, because it's very indicative of lots of other things.
If these decorative items belong to Yorhi, it proves he and his family were highly rewarded by Ramses the Great. Alabaster was a prized material thought of as desirable by the gods. If this was Yorhi's, it's evidence he had a very luxurious burial. But there's more treasure beneath the debris.
Okay, now we have a block coming out. Let's see. Oh my God!
Hidden under the sand for thousands of years, the block is covered in inscriptions.
They're all kneeling on the ground and weeping and mourning.
Beautiful carvings on the block's underside reveal distraught funeral mourners convulsed in grief. It's a religious scene depicting the sacred funerary rites for the tomb owner's burial.
It's not every day that we find something as big as that. We cannot find the name of the owner. It will need to be taken into the magazine and put together again by the specialists.
If they can find the name of the tomb owner in the inscriptions, the block could prove that Ramses' generals, like Yorhi, were so important they received elaborate funerary processions as part of Egypt's high society.
We find a lot of things, significant things that could help find information about Yorhi.
But Ola can't see Yorhi's name yet, nor any others. She needs to find more of the block to piece together their names.
Well, it's a lot of work still to be done, but it is promising. But I might tell you I have to go out before it falls on our heads.
With so many finds inside the tomb, and with so many rooms still to excavate, for Ola, this is simply the beginning.
Of course, it is part of the puzzle, and it is part of the suspense. Any block we find, we are expecting to find something important. Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. 3 times fantastic.
In Egypt's far south, Colleen investigates Ramses the Great's legacy. She wants to understand how he became the most powerful pharaoh of ancient Egypt and why we still know his name 3 millennia after his death.
This is Lake Nasser. I'm at the southern border of modern-day Egypt, and just a few miles upstream is Sudan. But this is ancient Nubia. This is where Ramses' armies and his bureaucracy maintained control over the all-important gold resources of ancient Egypt.
Ramses and other pharaohs sourced vast quantities of their precious gold from Nubia. Control of this area allowed Ramses to trade the gold and other goods with the rest of Africa and over the Red Sea with Asia. And it is here that Ramses chose to build one of his most impressive temples, Abu Simbel.
Incredible. No matter how many times I see this monument, I'm overwhelmed by how massive it is. The four colossal statues of Ramses face the Nile River. They would have been visible at a great distance, making a statement of Ramses' divine authority.
Here, in ancient Nubia, Ramses wanted everyone to know he was king, and this was his empire. Inside the temple walls, Colleen finds a vast record of Ramses' rule.
This temple is simply filled with Ramses' military victories. Battles are everywhere.
But in a side chamber, Colleen spots something more intriguing than military propaganda.
This is such a peculiar image. So Ramses is offering 2 jars of water, and then there's an offering table in front with 2 baskets of fruit, topped off with a lotus flower, and below are 2 loaves of bread. These are the sorts of offerings that kings would present to deities, and the coronation name of Ramses is labeling the god whom the king worships. This is not the king offering to just any god, but to his own deified self. This is Ramses as king offering to Ramses as a god, meaning that this temple was a place where Ramses could be worshipped for generations to come.
Throughout his reign, Ramses increased his power through military glory and by ultimately securing peace. But it was by making himself a god that he was able to secure his legacy as Ramses the Great. All pharaohs deify themselves before they die, but Ramses did it bigger and better, building grander temples to be worshipped from and proclaiming his divine right to rule more times than any other.
Abu Simbel and Karnak Temple are among the greatest wonders of the world. But in ancient Egypt, to have your name repeated granted you immortality in the afterlife. We know that 9 more pharaohs were named Ramses, and we're still repeating his name today. He truly lives forever.
Every season, ongoing excavations are uncovering new evidence about what made Ramses the most powerful and successful ruler of ancient Egypt. Hundreds of temples and monuments show his skill at propaganda. His repurposing of statues linked him to Egypt's illustrious past rulers. A mighty warrior, his peace treaty reveals that he was an outstanding diplomat. He held expensive burials for those loyal to him, and his lavish festivals show that he shared the prosperity of his long reign. He truly was the greatest of all Egypt's kings.
This is the entrance of the pyramid. It's really very exciting.
Archaeologists are on the brink of the discovery of a lifetime.
Nobody entered here. It's a really important moment for all of us.
Ahead, the burial chamber of a mysterious ancient queen, untouched for 4,000 years.
We will see if this wooden beam is really stable enough. We will remove this part. Let's hope it's safe.
Egypt, the land of the pyramids and mighty monuments, built by all-powerful pharaohs like Khufu, Ramses, and Tutankhamun. But now, archaeologists are revealing new evidence of rulers of a different kind who could even become pharaohs themselves, the queens of Egypt. How did these women rise to power in a world dominated by men? To investigate, American Egyptologist Colleen Darnell explores a temple built by one of Egypt's greatest queens, Hatshepsut.
This temple is fantastic.
A row of imposing statues lines the temple.
Oh my goodness, this is amazing. These statues are images of the pharaoh in the form of Osiris, but we knew it's a king because of the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt.
This is the temple of Queen Hatshepsut, but there are statues of kings everywhere.
The king wears a divine beard and holds a crook and a flail, typical symbols of royalty.
Even though she was a woman, Hatshepsut portrayed herself as a man. Colleen investigates why.
I would like to find a cartouche that has a royal name written in hieroglyphs.
A cartouche is an oval-shaped box used in Egyptian inscriptions. Only kings or queens could put their name inside one. Colleen hunts inside the temple. It's a difficult task. Many cartouches here have been hacked out or destroyed.
Aha! This is the cartouche I've been looking for, Hatshepsut. Over here is the word Sat for daughter. Now this is a big clue. The daughter of Re, of his body, Hatshepsut.
Hatshepsut's cartouche identifies her as a daughter, not a son. It's clear she was not hiding her gender. But the only way Hatshepsut could project her power as a pharaoh was to portray herself as a man, as a king. Hatshepsut was a queen of Egypt and one of only a few women ever to rule as king. She restored broken trade routes with foreign lands, bringing a wealth of luxuries like gold, myrrh, and ebony into Egypt. In the capital, Thebes, she erected colossal monuments, signifying the power, riches, and order she brought to her country. And her mortuary temple is one of the grandest ever built in Egypt. Its splendor is a monument to Egypt's success under Hatshepsut's rule. But how did this famous and celebrated queen become king? Colleen investigates.
This is a really interesting wall. The name of Thutmose III is here, and these would have been the cartouches of Hatshepsut.
Hatshepsut was the daughter of one pharaoh and married to another. When her husband died, her infant nephew, Thutmose III, became king.
Thutmose III was just a child, so Hatshepsut essentially ruled Egypt as queen. But then she transforms into pharaoh herself, into a co-regent with Thutmose III.
Hatshepsut ruled as co-regent for 20 prosperous years. The magnificent temple is testament to her rule. But why is it so hard to find evidence of her here?
After Hatshepsut's death, Thutmose became sole pharaoh, and later on in his reign, he hacked out the names and images of his aunt, Hatshepsut.
Thutmose wanted to erase the memory of Hatshepsut and her children to secure the throne for his son. Yet Hatshepsut's name survives as evidence of the power women could attain in ancient Egypt.
She was a spectacular pharaoh, from monumental building campaigns to expeditions to far-off lands. But I want to know more about how she ruled as a woman.
Archaeologist Patrick Chudzik is also exploring the Temple of Hatshepsut. Like Colleen, he's on the trail of how she ruled as a woman.
From 22nd, 23rd dynasty.
Patrick always dreamed of becoming an Egyptologist. Now, he leads the Polish mission at one of Egypt's most famous monuments.
Hatshepsut is my favorite pharaoh. It's a specific story of a woman who became a female king.
His team excavates ground beside the temple. The old pathway leads to an ancient tomb.
To me, it's the most exciting tomb in the Hatshepsut temple.
100 years ago, American archaeologist Herbert Winlock excavated here. But he left a secret hidden beneath the temple, a tomb that he recorded but never fully excavated.
We know that this tomb was erected around 500 years before Hatshepsut's reign. And when she built her temple in this area, she left the area empty.
Hatshepsut could have destroyed the tomb to build her temple here, but she didn't.
The question is why she left the tomb open.
Patrick hopes that the mystery of the tomb might explain why Hatshepsut built her temple here and reveal something of how she ruled as a pharaoh queen. At Saqqara, Mohammed Magahed is also investigating the queens of Egypt. He is exploring the remains of a pyramid built for a queen.
I like our work because it's not boring. Every day you have a change. Every season you come here, you have something new.
Mohammed, who lives in the Czech Republic, has been returning to his native Egypt for 12 years to excavate this site. He sees archaeology as a forensic investigation.
This is our crime scene. Every piece of sand, every piece of limestone, it gives us an idea how the site looked like.
Mohammed heads up to the top of the pyramid. The core has collapsed, forming a deep crater in the center. He plans to search for the original entrance tunnel.
Today, we will start digging and finding the entrance of the pyramid.
This is the biggest pyramid ever built for a queen. She must have been extraordinarily powerful. Who was she?
For hundreds of years, we knew that this pyramid is a mystery.
The last attempt to excavate it in 1952 failed to find the burial chamber.
We knew that it was built for a queen, but we never knew who was buried inside. We used to call this pyramid the pyramid of the unknown queen.
Mohammed discovered the identity of the owner 2 years ago.
We found the granite column lying in this area, and on the column we have the name of the queen and her titles. Now we can say that this pyramid belonged to Queen Setebhur.
Setebor was the wife of King Djedkura, a powerful Old Kingdom pharaoh who ruled 4,400 years ago. Djedkura built the pyramid 170 feet tall, cased with white Tora limestone and capped with a stone pyramidion plated with gold. Around his pyramid sprawled a vast complex of columns, statues, and temples. To the northeast is a second pyramid for his wife, Queen Setebor, with blocks weighing up to 30 tons, rising 110 feet from the desert sand. Clad in brilliant limestone, it had a burial chamber at its heart to keep Setebor's body safe for all eternity. Queen Setebor's tomb is the largest remaining pyramid in Egypt with an unexplored burial chamber.
The pyramid of Setebhur is really the last pyramid to enter in the modern time. Nobody entered here. It's a really important moment for all of us.
Discoveries in her burial chamber could explain her importance and why she had such a huge pyramid. But today, large parts of the pyramid are missing and filled with sand. Mohammed has to dig deep to find any remains. A metal scraping catches Mohammed's attention.
We have here, for the first time today, some nice white limestone.
The high-quality limestone block could be a sign of the entrance.
We have to still go deeper.
After many hours of hard digging, Mohammed feels he is getting close.
I'm so excited. Underneath here, I'm definitely sure that we will have the entrance of the pyramid.
No one in the modern era has entered Queen Setibor's burial chamber, but Mohammed has discovered an ancient passage. He could soon be the first person to step inside the chamber in over 4,000 years. But ahead, a wall of sand blocks the way. A team excavated here in 1952. They built a wall and propped up a collapsed ceiling before they abandoned their search for the burial chamber.
We will see if this wooden beam is really stable enough. And if it's not stable, we have to build here a small wall to support this.
Thousands of tons of rubble and stone are directly above their heads.
Let's hope it's safe. We will remove this part of wood and we will build here.
Mohammed must make the corridor safe immediately or risk a collapse.
We cannot leave it for tomorrow. We have immediately to build it. Today.
At Deir el-Bahari, near Luxor, Colleen is investigating the reign of the pharaoh queen Hatshepsut and how she ruled a society dominated by men.
So this is interesting. Hatshepsut is being breastfed by goddesses. And this is something that we know kings claimed, that they were consuming the milk of various goddesses.
The engraving reveals that Hatshepsut claimed kingship as her divine right. She was the choice of the gods.
This is the god Amun, and he's seated. His legs are slightly overlapping those of Ahmosa, the mother of Hatshepsut. Amun is handing an Ankh sign, the sign of life, to Queen Ahmosa. And what this means is that Amun is impregnating the queen. This is the moment of Hatshepsut's conception.
Hatshepsut claimed divine birth, that she was the daughter of the god Amun. It was a powerful claim.
Hatshepsut is being very clever here. Only the king can claim to be of divine birth. She's using as propaganda the divine birth, claiming her right to be a pharaoh.
Egyptians expected the pharaoh to be male. Hatshepsut's royal birth and marriage were not enough to claim the throne. She had to invoke the will of the gods.
She was the daughter of a king and the wife of a king, but the divine birth scenes enabled her to become king.
Hatshepsut relied on clever propaganda to legitimize her revolutionary rule.
From the beginning of Egyptian history, queen mothers could rule when pharaohs were very young. But Hatshepsut does something different. She becomes pharaoh herself, co-regent with Thutmose III. And here in Hatshepsut's temple, we see her remarkable rise to power.
Hatshepsut was the firstborn of a pharaoh. She married the next pharaoh, her half-brother. But when he died, the next male heir was her infant nephew, Thutmose. When the child took the throne, she ruled by his side for 7 years. But then she made a power grab, declaring herself a true pharaoh. As pharaoh, Hatshepsut launched a campaign of propaganda. She painted scenes showing the great god Amun as her father and of her birth in the presence of the gods, legitimizing her as the divine heir to the throne of Egypt.
Ooh, this is incredible. This is Hatshepsut as a sphinx, and you can see her long curling tail. And what's awesome are the legs of the enemies flying up in the air as she tramples them. Even though Hatshepsut was a female king, this depiction of her as a trampling sphinx indicates the ferocity of her rule.
Hatshepsut had to project a carefully crafted image of physical strength and divine right. She was a prototype for ruling queens throughout history.
As a female pharaoh, Hatshepsut had tremendous power. But what I want to know is, did other queens exert the same authority?
Colleen wants to find out if more ancient Egyptian queens followed Hatshepsut's example, or if there was another way to be a powerful queen. At Saqqara, Mohammed's team races to reinforce the entrance to Queen Sedabor's ancient pyramid. While Mohammed waits, the rest of his team excavates the strange ruins next to her pyramid. They have found huge stone blocks buried in a deep sand-filled pit. They could reveal clues to the role and power of Sedibor. But first, they have to dig them out.
With a very simple calculation, the block weight is 6.5 tons. For moving heavy stones like this, you don't need muscles, you need brain.
As the men get started, Mohammed spots ancient hieroglyphs carved into the granite.
It's mentioning twice the name of the queen and one of her titles, that's it. Interestingly, she is not mentioning that she's the king's wife.
The hieroglyphs suggest Sedibor is not just a royal wife. Also, the block itself could be a part of an important structure next to her pyramid. It could reveal the extent of her power and importance.
This is the fun maybe in our work. We collect small pieces and it makes you try to understand the rest of the story.
The men roll the block again until it sits precariously on the rails.
6.5 tons. Any mistake, it could cause an injury.
The block is finally moving the wrong way. The men struggle to move the granite block from the pit. But Mohammed has a new plan to get it out, using a chain block.
We'll see if it will work or no. So finally it's working. It's slow, but it's working.
At last, the men move the block and set it aside.
Wow, they did it.
Now, Mohammed can examine it in detail.
It's so beautiful. This was the door hinge, so the door socket was here.
Mohammed discovers the block is a lintel that would have sat above a grand doorway.
Now we know exactly the width of the door. In the future, we can reconstruct it.
The lintel bears Queen Sedibor's name, a clue it's part of the mysterious structure built next to her pyramid.
She's using very special granite, which was only used for kings, not for queens.
Was Sedibor acting as a king? What will this mystery building and her pyramid reveal about Queen Sedibor's power? At Deir el-Bahari, near Luxor, Patrick is also investigating a queen, Hatshepsut. Strangely, she preserved an ancient tomb beneath her magnificent mortuary temple. Patrick wants to know if it can shed light on how Hatshepsut ruled as a pharaoh queen. The original occupant of the tomb remains a mystery.
We are sure that it wasn't a prince or even the other son of king.
A hollow in the floor once held a mummy in a wooden coffin. They are both long gone, but Patrick has uncovered some significant clues.
We are cleaning the tomb inside. Among the thousands of kilograms of debris, we found magnificent objects from the tomb.
Their excavations confirm that the tomb predates Hatshepsut's temple by hundreds of years. Hatshepsut built her temple with 3 huge layered terraces carved into the rocks and parades of 22 columns. She adorned the walls with scenes that proclaimed her divine right to rule Egypt. But in the far corner, she left a small entrance to a corridor that led down to a plain burial chamber. Patrick's team excavated rubble containing thousands of ancient artifacts, including pottery and mysterious wooden figurines. Why did Hatshepsut build her temple on top of this hidden tomb?
Unfortunately, there is no inscriptional evidence, but I want to get to know what the objects which we revealed from the debris will tell us.
Pottery expert Anya Vezhniavska is working through the thousands of finds from the tomb. She thinks she's found something important.
I wanted to show you. There's a complete one, actually. Have
Oh,
you seen something like that?
never before. Oh, that's impressive.
Even the smallest find could help reveal the secrets of the tomb and what significance it held for Hatshepsut. In Saqqara, deep inside the pyramid, Mohammed's team has built an extra supporting wall. Now, he can resume the search for Queen Setibor's burial chamber.
We have measured above the pyramid, and we are almost in the middle of the pyramid here.
If Mohammed can reach her tomb, it may answer vital questions. Why did Setibor have the biggest pyramid ever built for a queen? What was the extent of her power? But to get any further, Mohammed faces his toughest obstacle yet. The end of the corridor is blocked by an unstable wall of sand and rubble. It could avalanche down at the slightest touch.
I called now the Rais to instruct him how to proceed. I also trust him, so I will take his opinion if this is stable.
The foreman, the Rais, gives a cautious go-ahead to continue the search for the burial chamber. From the top of the pyramid, Mohammed can see the problem. A hole is forming in the crater. The rubble is falling straight through to the men in the tunnel.
The bad sign is part of the ceiling is not preserved. The good sign, we are not very deep, so we are very close to the burial chamber.
Down below, the rubble just keeps on coming. The dust slows the work of Mohammed's men, but finally, they make a breakthrough.
For the first time, we have the daylight inside the burial chamber of the queen. We have to continue removing the rubble and the limestone chips.
Mohammed checks the pyramid core, but he must tread carefully where the tomb ceiling has collapsed.
Part of the north wall of the burial chamber of Queen Setibhur, which is fantastic to see from the other side.
There's still a lot of ancient rubble to remove before he can investigate inside. He only has 1 week left on his permit for the site. Will it be enough time to reveal the secrets of Queen Setibor's burial chamber? At Abu Simbel, near Egypt's southern border, Colleen visits one of Egypt's most remarkable monuments. She is investigating how women wielded power as queens in a world dominated by men. Hatshepsut turned herself into a king. But was there another way for queens to exercise power? Colleen has come to the temple of one of the most exalted queens of all to find out.
I want to investigate one of the greatest queens of history. Her name is Nefertari, and she's the wife of Ramses the Great.
Ramses II ruled Egypt for 60 years. He expanded the empire and built more monuments than any other ruler. His achievements earned him the title Ramses the Great.
This is a statue of Queen Nefertari. To either side are images of her husband, Ramses II, but what's remarkable is she's almost of equal height to the pharaoh himself.
In ancient Egypt, size meant power. Nefertari was portrayed as having virtually equal power to Ramses himself. But Colleen finds an inscription revealing something even more impressive.
Here's an inscription that tells us, Weben Ra en Merut es. Re rises for love of her.
Re was the ancient Egyptian sun god.
This column of hieroglyphs means that Nefertari was one of the few queens to achieve the status of a goddess.
Nefertari was honored as a goddess, even though she was not a pharaoh queen like Hatshepsut. What did she do to deserve this exalted status?
So now I want to know, is this just propaganda for a favorite wife, or did she actually wield power? This is the queen. Nefertari is incredibly beautiful, but I think there's more to the story than that. This is a clay tablet found in modern-day Turkey.
It's a letter written in ancient Akkadian. It shows the Queen of the Hittites writing to Nefertari before the two empires completed the world's first recorded peace treaty.
This means that she was really involved in diplomacy between the two greatest empires of the ancient world.
It shows that Nefertari was an influential figure. She helped broker a treaty that kept peace between the great empires for 40 years. Ramses acknowledged his queen's importance on the walls of her temple.
This is Ramses smiting an enemy. It's brutal, but this is how ancient Egyptian kings expressed their power. What's unusual is that Queen Nefertari is behind him.
Kings rarely shared the glory of military victories with their queens. It suggests Nefertari played a significant role in Ramses' reign.
It's possible that this is propaganda, but it's also likely that this shows Queen Nefertari had real political power.
The evidence suggests Nefertari and Ramses formed a royal power couple, each vital to the success of the other.
Ancient Egyptian queens, whether they were married to a pharaoh or ruled as pharaoh in their own right, they truly wielded authority.
While Hatshepsut ruled as a king, Nefertari exercised a different sort of power. From behind the throne, her astute diplomacy and political influence helped change the course of Egypt's history. At Saqqara, time is running out for Mohammed to discover the secrets of Queen Sedebor's burial chamber. His team has finally cleared a path. Now Mohammed can get through to see the chamber for himself. But they face a new danger from above. The roof of the burial chamber has completely collapsed, and the crumbling, overhanging walls could follow at any moment.
This is the area which we need to support.
If the walls are only propped up by the loose rubble underfoot, the slightest move could bring them crashing down in an instant. But if they can find solid stone foundations beneath the wall, they can be more confident that the overhang won't collapse as they dig.
We have here part of the large stone, and he is looking for the continuation of the stones.
They search for the massive stone slabs that once supported the structure above. Until they find them, their only protection is to patch the walls with mortar. Outside Sedibor's pyramid, Czech archaeologist Hanna Vymazalova helps Mohammed investigate the mysterious ruins. If she can discover what they were, it might reveal the source of Sedibor's power and how she ruled as queen. She finds an important clue.
Yeah, so we have here the typical pattern of the ceilings, like a night sky with stars.
The stars would have originally been painted yellow on a dark blue background. They help Hannah identify the structure.
This is the roofing block, which came from the portico of the queen.
It's part of a huge portico, a ceremonial entrance to what must have been a temple.
This was the portico, and here is an entrance into the temple, which was just opposite to the stairs. And if you measure the width of this entrance, it actually fits very nicely.
Hannah's discovery proves this mysterious building was Queen Sedibor's funerary temple. Here, priests and worshippers spoke her name, and according to Egyptian belief, ensured her soul lived for eternity.
It is very exciting to see it all coming together. It's a puzzle, 3D.
It's a significant find, and its size is more evidence that Sedibor was a powerful woman.
The funerary temple is the biggest funerary temple built for a queen in the Old Kingdom.
What more can these ruins reveal about Sedibor and the queens of the Old Kingdom? Could she have paved the way for powerful New Kingdom queens like Hatshepsut and Nefertari? At Deir el-Bahari, Patrick wants to know why Hatshepsut chose this location for her temple and how she ruled in a world dominated by men. He hopes that the thousands of finds from a tomb beneath it might yield clues. One new discovery intrigues Patrick and Anya.
It's amazing. A double bottle showing two females with a female breast in the upper part.
And that's interesting because female features also.
And it also came from the tomb.
Yes, yes.
The pieces look like religious charms.
This cow head with a cobra and a solar disc between the horns, which is unfortunately gone. Amulets showing the head of a woman with cow ears.
Patrick has a hunch that he's seen these features before. He heads up to a shrine that Hatshepsut built in her temple. It could reveal why the Pharaoh Queen built here.
And the pillars, we can see a female head with a cow ears on both sides.
Hatshepsut dedicated this shrine to the cow goddess Hathor. It's directly above the tomb. The matching finds confirm a theory Patrick has, that the tomb was used by a religious cult that worshipped Hathor. Hathor was the mother of the gods and their representatives here on Earth, the pharaohs. Ancient Egyptians worshipped Hathor in the form of a cow, or as a woman with cow horns holding the sun disk. She was the powerful goddess of motherhood and fertility, who breathed new life into dead souls and guided them to the hereafter. In some myths, Hathor gave birth to the sun each day, bringing life and banishing the darkness. She was particularly revered by pharaohs. By feeding them her divine milk, Hathor bestowed on them the power to rule.
It's really exciting because the items which we found in the tomb, now we know that they were connected for sure with the cow goddess Hathor.
The tomb was built long before Hatshepsut, but the Hathor amulets discovered in it date to her era. They're powerful proof that the old tomb was used in the cult worship of Hathor in Hatshepsut's time.
It's telling us about the very intensive story of the cult of the cow goddess.
Patrick believes this is why Hatshepsut built her temple here. This entire valley had ancient links with the Hathor cult. The sheer quantity of discoveries in the tomb prove the cult was very active during Hatshepsut's reign.
The cow goddess was worshipped in Adel Bahari, at least since the Middle Kingdom. But Hatshepsut decided to build not only her temple at Adel Bahari, but also to construct a special shrine for the cow goddess.
Hatshepsut was one of the few queens ever to become pharaoh. She used masculine images all over her temple to project her power. But Patrick's new evidence shows that she projected feminine powers too, promoting Hathor here ahead of all the other gods. The powerful goddess of femininity, motherhood, and women helped Hatshepsut become the mother of her nation. At Saqqara, in Sedabor's burial chamber, Mohammed's team is searching for solid limestone foundations beneath the overhanging walls so they can be sure they are safe. He hopes the chamber will hold clues to how Sedabor ruled as a queen. Was she a ruling pharaoh like Hatshepsut, or a powerful wife like Nefertari? Finally, a worker sees a smooth limestone face. Mohammed confirms it's the stone he's been looking for.
It's a good news because it's supporting all of the area here.
Solid stone foundations underpin the overhang, so digging can safely proceed. It's the last day of excavation inside the pyramid. Hannah joins Mohammed in the burial chamber. But will they have time to excavate all this rubble and find any traces of Sedabor? They've discovered she built the largest pyramid and funerary temple of any queen of the Old Kingdom. But how did she rule? Was she pharaoh herself, or part of a royal power couple? Mohammed hopes to find answers in the burial chamber itself.
It seems everything was smashed. This very small, tiny, small pieces of limestone, it means the stone robbers came here and smashed everything.
Stone robbers plundered valuable white limestone from most of Egypt's ancient tombs, just as tomb robbers took their treasures. But Mohammed still sees a treasure trove of clues.
Yes, we have more surprises.
The exposed limestone reveals an important new discovery.
The sirdab. It's really nice. The queen built for the first time a sirdab. It's a storeroom to the east of her burial chamber.
A sirdab was a chamber usually reserved for the statue of the pharaoh. Later queens had sirdabs, but Mohammed has discovered Sedabor was the first queen to build one. Why was Sedabor able to claim this and other privileges of kings? All the clues show that Mohammed and Hannah have discovered one of the most illustrious queens of ancient Egypt. Sedabor was wife of Djedkura, one of the great pharaohs of the Old Kingdom. She was powerful enough to build the largest pyramid and temple complex of any Old Kingdom queen. The size and design of her mortuary temple looks less like a queen's and more like a king's. Could this mean that Djedkura's mysterious queen may have ruled as king? Hieroglyphics expert Hannah thinks that the answer might be hiding on a column they discovered by her pyramid. It's inscribed with her name, Sedabor, The last part of it, Hor, stands for Horus, the falcon god.
The name of Horus is written with the individual letters, not with the sign of the falcon, because if it's written as a falcon, that would be the king's name.
The Horus inscription reveals the true extent of Setibor's power.
There are features which scream, I'm the important queen, but at the same time, there are features which show that she is not a royal person, she's not the ruler, she's not the king.
Setibor was not a pharaoh queen, the supreme ruler of Egypt. She didn't have the power of Hatshepsut, but the evidence uncovered here suggests she was a powerful royal from a powerful royal dynasty, and perhaps reigned more like Nefertari 1,000 years later.
Everything that we are uncovering here, they all seem to indicate that she might have been related to the kings. So maybe she was the link between those kings and Djedkare himself. Maybe that's why she was so important, because she was the one who helped him to the throne of Egypt, and she was the power behind the throne.
Their discoveries reveal that Queen Setibor was one of the most powerful and influential figures of ancient Egypt. In a society that venerated its ancestors, perhaps she was even a role model for the great queens who followed her. Finally, the team has excavated enough rubble for Mohammed to see the dimensions of Setibor's burial chamber.
Maybe this is the line of the height of the room. The ceiling reached up until this line, all the way. We have the line in the room, all the way here.
The discovery of the ceiling line means there is still 10 feet of rubble to clear to reveal the entire tomb, and time is running out. Today is the last day on his permit for the site.
I'm not sure we will reach the floor today. Actually, I am not sure even if we will have a floor.
But Mohammed has achieved his goal. He's found Setibor's burial chamber, and he'll return to excavate it fully.
I hope in the coming season we will come again and we will continue and we'll finish the work.
Mohammed and Hannah have rediscovered a long-lost queen who towered over Egypt 900 years before Hatshepsut. A queen ahead of her time, inspiring queens for centuries to come. And a queen like Hatshepsut, who projected masculine power but drew on the feminine goddess Hathor. And Nefertari, who wielded her formidable power alongside one of the greatest kings of all time. Perhaps Setibor was a trailblazer for both. Now, she can be restored to her rightful place alongside them and be recognized amongst the greatest queens of ancient Egypt. Archaeologists are about to open a coffin sealed for more than 2,000 years.
It's very risky. There are a big crack on top of the coffin.
Inside could be a rare, undisturbed mummy.
Are you ready to open? يلا بالراحة خالص.
The Valley of the Kings. Eternal home to the pharaohs of ancient Egypt's golden age. In these mountains, archaeologists have made some of history's most extraordinary discoveries. The bodies of royals dating back 3,000 years. The corpses of these kings represent the peak of the art of mummification, preparing a dead body with oils and linen wrapping to avoid decay. But the evolution of this sacred custom is still shrouded in mystery. Why and how did Egyptians start preserving their bodies? And what happened to mummification when, after more than 2,000 years, ancient Egypt was conquered? Today, Archaeologists across Egypt search for mummies from the civilization's earliest days and from its final reckoning to shed light on mummification's rise and fall. Texas-born archaeologist Meredith Brand encountered her first mummy in London's British Museum at age 7. Ever since, she's been desperate to unlock the secrets they contain.
You can hear the silence, the wind, and feel that this was a sacred place.
Meredith has come to the pharaoh's tombs because she believes the secrets of the origins of mummification can be found here.
This site holds vital clues to the mummification process, both in terms of technology, but also in terms of the ritual and the reasons why ancient Egyptians wanted so badly to preserve their bodies.
More than 60 tombs have been uncovered in the valley. Most are decorated floor to ceiling with elaborate imagery.
Oh, the carvings, the painting is so fresh and vivid.
These artworks were designed to help carry the owner's mummy safely to the afterlife. Meredith searches for evidence of the ancient Egyptians' obsession with mummification.
Oh, this is the scene I've come for. Okay, so what I can see here is this jackal-headed god Anubis, and he's enacting mummification, which was his sacred role.
The image represents the very first mummification performed by gods, the embalming of Osiris. According to legend, Osiris was one of the first gods to walk the earth, but in a feud, he was murdered by his brother Seth, who scattered his body parts across Egypt. Osiris's wife searched the length and breadth of the Nile to recover his broken corpse. With Anubis's help, she reassembled Osiris and wrapped him in strips of linen, resurrecting him for a second life as ruler of the underworld. From then on, powerful Egyptians had their bodies wrapped and embalmed, so just like Osiris, they could live again in the afterlife.
This scene reveals the ultimate goal of the king, which was a perfect mummy so that he could successfully be reborn in the afterlife.
The image depicts the myth of the origins of mummification, but it dates to the New Kingdom, more than 1,000 years after wealthy Egyptians began preserving their corpses. To find out exactly how the earliest Egyptians mummified their dead, archaeologists need to find one of the rarest of archaeological treasures, a mummy from the Old Kingdom. In Saqqara, world-renowned mummy expert Salima Ikram has been called out to an extraordinary find in one of Egypt's oldest cemeteries. Born in Pakistan, she fell in love with Egypt on a family visit at age 9. She's spent a career poring over its dried-out corpses. And not just humans. She's examined the mummies of dogs, cats, even a lion. In a tomb dating back more than 4,000 years, archaeologist Mohammed Magahed has uncovered a single human mummy. If it belongs to the tomb's original owner, it would be one of the oldest mummies Salima, or anyone, has ever seen.
If we actually do have an Old Kingdom mummy, it'll be terribly exciting. I've worked on one or two others and they are so rare, but most of the time, burial chambers and entire sites have been reused long after the Old Kingdom. So I hope Muhammad is not in for a disappointment.
For 4 years, Mohammed has led investigations into this mysterious tomb.
Salima, thank you for coming today.
What he has unearthed has stunned the world of Egyptology. Under the sand and rubble, Mohammed discovered a corridor leading to an antechamber painted in stunning detail and vibrant colors. Hieroglyphs reveal this is the tomb of a man called Kui, a relation of the royal family who lived over 4,000 years ago. In the burial chamber nearby, there were 4 jars to hold mummified organs, a smashed empty sarcophagus, and strewn all over the floor, the fragments of a mummy. It could be one of the oldest Egyptian mummies ever found. But is it the bones of Kui or an imposter? Last year, Mohammed's team found more mummies buried just outside the tomb's walls from a much later era. If the mummy in the burial chamber is from the same time, it can't be Kui. Salima is here to examine the mummy to try to establish a positive ID.
It's rather a lovely and huge and beautifully organized magazine, mashallah.
If it does turn out to be Kui, the corpse could answer one of Egyptologists' oldest questions. Just how early in their history did Egyptians perfect the mysterious art of mummification? Near the oasis city of Fayum, Egyptian archaeologist Basim Gayhad has just set up camp on the desolate site of the ancient town of Philadelphia to investigate mummification at the end of the Egyptian Empire. As a child, drawn to Egypt's archaeological secrets, Bassem begged his father every weekend to take him to the pyramids or to Cairo's Egyptian Museum. These days, he gets to live on his own archaeological site for months at a time.
This is our sleeping tent. This is our kitchen, small kitchen here. We will have Chef Yasser. Chef.
Some 2,000 years after the age of the pyramids, the time of the Egyptian kings came to an end. Ancient Egypt was invaded by Greece. The Greeks had no tradition of preserving their dead. Bassem wants to know how the conquest changed the practice of mummification.
As you could see, there is no evidence of anything on the surface. It's only sand and desert. That's it.
Today, he's on the hunt for something incredibly rare, an intact Greek grave. Now, a new photograph from a satellite has given him a fresh hint of where to dig.
So the shaded area that we could see in the satellite images is an elevated area. It could be an area of interest for the excavation. So let's go.
Bassem's team strips away the thin layer of wind-blown sand from the mound. Immediately beneath, he finds a promising clue.
If it's looted, there is no compact sand. In this area, the sand is very compact. We have to remove it very carefully, and we will see.
Within minutes, Bassem's workers reveal the outlines of 6 separate burials cut into the rock. It's a fantastic discovery, but are these graves undisturbed?
We are very curious to see what's inside. It could tell a lot of stories, wonderful stories, about how the Greeks and Egyptians lived together in one space.
The workers clean away loose sand from each burial in search of an untouched grave.
It seems that they found something there. It seems that my team here found a vaulted tomb, and it's sealed. And we know it's sealed because that the guy who sealed it 2,000 years ago, he left his fingerprints as a seal impression.
The unbroken mud seal plastered over the tomb roof proves no one ever robbed this grave. Beneath the brickwork should be a coffin, and its occupant should reveal how the inhabitants of a Greek town in Egypt buried their dead.
Maybe we could find a wooden coffin, if we are lucky. Maybe we could find a pottery coffin. Maybe we could find a mummy or a skeleton. We will see.
The sealed tomb could contain an Egyptian or a rare ancient Greek body. In their homeland, ancient Greeks didn't mummify their dead. But could their practices have changed when they settled among Egyptians? To get inside the tomb, Bassem must destroy the seal and dismantle the mud brick roof.
It seems that it was very tightly closed, so we are removing very carefully, brick by brick, the blocking in order to see what could be inside.
The structure itself proves the tomb dates to the era of Greek rule. The team now has to remove just a few bricks before they can see inside.
We know very well that the larger you go, the older you go. So we could say from the mud brick size that we are at the 2nd century.
Surprise! The team breaks through the roof of the tomb and catches their first glimpse of its contents.
Oh, it's phenomenal. Yeah, I'm so excited.
It's an undisturbed coffin, an incredible find, and exactly what Bassem hoped for. The painted wooden casket has a peaked roof, not the rounded top of Egyptian sarcophagi. Greeks lived side by side with Egyptians in Philadelphia, and this is almost certainly a rare Greek burial. The question is, was the occupant buried in the Greek tradition or Egyptian?
Until we open it, we just don't know if there is a mummy inside or just a simple skeleton. We just want to wait.
To find out, Bassem needs to extract the coffin without crushing it. In the desert of Gebelin, just south of Luxor, Meredith searches for evidence of Egypt's earliest death rites. She believes the myths that drove Egyptians to mummify their own bodies had roots much earlier than ancient Egyptian civilization. Prehistoric rock art depicting wildlife suggests this area was once a sacred place. In the 19th century, archaeologists identified it as a burial ground.
This is a desolate, dry landscape. Nothing much to see on the surface. But underneath these rocks and sand, there would have been prehistoric tombs.
In 1896, an Egyptologist from the British Museum received a tip-off of a momentous discovery. Buried under a thin layer of desert debris, local farmers had found a mummified body preserved in astonishing detail. On the upper arm, tattoos of horned animals were still visible, and from the head sprouted tufts of red hair, earning this mummy its original nickname, Ginger. There was a puncture wound to the left shoulder blade and a fractured rib beneath. Forensic analysis has revealed the body is male and over 5,000 years old. But how is this body so perfectly preserved? For Meredith, the evidence suggests the man's mummification was not planned. Instead, it was an accident of nature.
In this photo, I can see there's no bandages or anything that would have preserved this mummy. So it would seem that this was not an intentional mummification. He was preserved by the sand. There was no ritual or magic or anything involved, just the drying power of nature.
Hundreds of years before the first pharaoh, this man lived around the fertile flood plains along the Nile. But around his 20th birthday, he was brutally stabbed in the back and left for dead. He was buried in a shallow grave with simple clay grave goods and covered with sand. But the desert sun and hot, dry sand quickly evaporated all the water from his body, stopping it from decomposing, freezing him in time until his discovery 5,400 years later. Archaeologists have found no papyri that explain the historical origins of mummification, but Meredith believes the practice could have evolved from accidents of nature.
Natural mummies, like the Gobelin Man, would have inspired ancient Egyptians that if they could use technology to harness the power of nature, their bodies too could last forever into eternity. It's a truly spectacular discovery. It tells us where mummification started.
In Aswan, across the river from the city, a team of Egyptian archaeologists scours a remote hilltop necropolis. They hope its long-lost tombs will hold evidence of how ordinary Egyptians prepared their dead for the afterlife. The few tombs that have been found suggest the people of Aswan used this burial ground some 2,000 years ago as Egyptian civilization was in decline. Born in the town beside the Nile, archaeologist Syed El-Rawi has walked these outcrops since childhood. High up and inaccessible, it is an ideal location for a cemetery.
The tomb is built in the hill to save from some robbers. I think some robbers and some workers here.
Today, he is investigating the unmistakable outline of a buried stairwell. He believes this will lead to answers on how the less wealthy treated their dead.
I think we have a lot of mummies inside the tomb. I am very lucky I can guess.
The only way to test his luck is to dig. In the Old Kingdom necropolis at Saqqara, Salima has been called to examine a mummy found in a noble's lavish tomb. She hopes an X-ray will help establish if it's the original tomb owner. If it is, it could be one of the oldest internationally mummified bodies ever found.
Where is Hui kept?
Here is Mr. Hui.
Hello, Mr. Hui.
We will take it down.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll do the X-ray of Hui right here.
Okay.
We have electricity, and then we'll do the developing in the other room.
Perfect.
So easy peasy, inshallah.
Inshallah. Okay.
Salima's permit to scan the mummy is only valid for one day. She's turned to a trusted piece of equipment, an archaeologist's field X-ray.
Our X-ray machine dates to, I think, the 80s. I know, longer than some of us have been alive. But it's tiny, it's easy to move around. The bad thing is, though, because it's not digital, you have to do your photography and then your developing, and then you find out if it was a disaster or a success.
Before Kui goes under the scanner, Salima will conduct a visual inspection.
The moment of truth.
It's the first time she's met the mummy. Only fragments of the body remain.
So there is no head, but we have the ribs, and we have pelvis. I think it was quite fat. It's a good solid thigh.
Thousands of years spent in the tomb of Kui, the Old Kingdom noble, have not been kind to this mummy.
Oh, it looks like a... I think it's rodents have eaten this.
Yeah.
If this is Kui's body, there's not much of him left. But for mummy expert Salima, there is enough to tell how it was preserved. That could give her a rough idea of its age.
It smells like a nicer quality mummy. This in particular seems to be very impregnated with resins. I mean, look at that. It's extremely high quality.
Ancient embalmers bathed bodies in expensive resins from tree sap, preserving the flesh before they wrapped the corpse.
Look at all of this textile, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
This is really very fine quality linen.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
The mummy seems to have been wrapped in the highest grade of bandages. This matches the detailed picture of Kui's lavish lifestyle depicted in his tomb. Kui was a high-ranking official, a member of the pharaoh's royal court during the Pyramid Age, near the beginning of Egyptian civilization. Scenes painted in his tomb show that he could afford the luxuries of fine food in vast quantities. And jars found in the tomb, made to hold the mummified organs of the deceased, are more evidence of a high-status burial. A man like this could certainly afford to have his body embalmed in resin and wrapped in the finest linen. But for Salima, the quality of the linen rings alarm bells.
It's extraordinary. The only time I've seen so much of this kind of good quality linen has been in the 21st dynasty.
The 21st dynasty of Egyptian pharaohs reigned more than 1,000 years after Kui lived. Wrapped in the most delicate linen and drenched in expensive resin, if this is Kui, then the art of mummification was far more advanced in the Pyramid Age than experts believed.
Oh, good, Muhammad. You are here, at last.
So what do you think?
I think it's a beautiful mummy.
So do we have any other human remains from Old Kingdom mummified like this?
No. It could change entirely the history of mummification if it happens to be Old Kingdom.
If this is Kui, Salima will have to rewrite her own textbooks on Egypt's oldest mummies. As of yet, she's not convinced. She will need to see more evidence. On the cliffs above Aswan, Syed and his team are into their second day of excavating a fresh tomb. They hope it will reveal how ordinary ancient Egyptians prepared bodies for the afterlife as their civilization faded. They've shifted several tons of sand to expose the stairs. In the heat of the early afternoon, the work is punishing.
We have no shelter from the sun. We need to wake quickly to excavate the tomb here. Okay. My team, they found the door.
If the tomb contains bodies, they could hold clues to how ordinary ancient Egyptians preserved their dead.
Can have some light. Oh my God.
Syed's team has made an extraordinary discovery. A rare tomb packed full of mummies.
There's no air in here.
The remains of a stone sarcophagus suggest the bodies piled around it are not the tomb's original occupants. So, who are they? Team foreman Abdul prepares a mummy for initial inspection.
The mummy is very delicate. You can see the mummy is the man.
Abdul delicately brushes to expose the ragged remains of the mummy's bandages.
You can see his mummification is cheap mummification. He has not noble. He is poor man.
The mummy's condition suggests he was not wealthy enough to afford a high-quality mummification. The other bodies buried with him are also badly preserved. There's not enough space for Syed to examine how this mummy was embalmed, so he decides to extract the body. A mummy this poorly preserved could fall apart with the slightest shock. In the necropolis of ancient Philadelphia, near Fayum, Bassem's search has finally produced an intact grave of an ancient Greek. Egypt's conquerors did not practice mummification in their homeland. But what did they do here in Egypt? To find out, he needs to release the 2,000-year-old coffin.
So we're removing now brick by brick. It's a very sensitive operation.
With the top layer of bricks removed, Bassem is able to inspect the full length of the tomb. Elaborate decorations on the casket confirm his suspicions.
I'm sure 100% that this is Greek coffin, but we have to take it as fast as possible because we can't just leave it exposed to the sun. So we are going to lift it up from the grave.
The team has no idea how degraded the roof of the coffin might be. Any mistake could be catastrophic.
It is really stressful. Any single mud brick that could fall on this wooden coffin will destroy it, so we need to be sure.
The crew systematically removes just enough bricks to open a gap wide enough for the coffin to pass through.
It is really tight inside, so we are trying to enlarge the space in order to lift it up. And it's really delicate, it's really sensitive.
Bassem doesn't want to destroy any more of the precious tomb structure than necessary. But the coffin has to come out. Released from the tomb, the intricately painted coffin and its occupants are in more danger than they have been in the last 2,000 years.
So now I need to take this coffin in the shade immediately because it's very delicate and very sensitive. We have to move it to the car and then to the tent. So we're gonna move it. يلا رجالة. يلا رجالة على يد واحدة.
Whether it holds a mummy or a skeleton, this coffin could reveal how the Greeks, who seized control of Egypt, buried their dead. On the hilltop above Aswan, Syed's mummy has completed its journey to the safety of the analysis tent. It's clear this mummy's afterlife has been traumatic.
The mummy, it has a hole. It's from robbery.
Embalmers placed carved stones in the wrapping of wealthier mummies as magical protection. But it's unlikely the poor could afford that luxury.
Maybe the robbers left empty-handed.
The secrets of how this man's body was mummified are hidden within the bandages. But Syed can't unwrap him for fear the mummy will crumble into dust. The team needs to find more lower-class mummies to figure out how ancient Egyptians preserved the poor. Across the site, Syed's colleague, archaeologist Hala Hussein, has spent weeks uncovering a different tomb. She has also found mummies, or at least bits of them. Hala's tomb contains the remains of some 20 mummies, but they're in terrible condition. Evidence of wasps' nests suggest insects may have played a role in the damage. But in the destruction lies an opportunity. The mummies' bodies are exposed, allowing Hala to see beneath the bandages and search for more clues to how ordinary ancient Egyptians tried to preserve their dead.
I don't think it's rich people or the noble because the mummifications not tell us that. I think it's poor people.
The necropolis contains almost 300 tombs. Each could have been the eternal home for dozens of ordinary ancient Egyptians. Now, archaeologists can begin to sketch a picture of their possible history. Each tomb was originally cut for a single mummy, furnished with a sandstone coffin. Their relatives added bodies to the tomb when they died until the family died out or moved away. Hundreds of years later, poorer Egyptians reused the forgotten tombs, filling them up with badly mummified corpses before the tombs were looted and the exposed mummies destroyed. Most of the mummies in Hala's tomb are too degraded to tell much about the way they were mummified, but one body offers a grisly clue. In a niche in the wall, Hala finds the broken mummy of a baby.
Here we have remain just part of chilled body. It have stick inside the body.
The stick was inserted in the body to hold the head. It suggests the body was already decomposed when it was embalmed. Not only were the poor mummified badly, they were mummified too late. The bits of them that survive suggest the afterlives of these ordinary ancient Egyptians were far from peaceful. They were destroyed by insects, desecrated by robbers, and any meager valuables were ripped from their wrappings. But for Syed at least, these mummies are helping piece together the mysterious fates of the ordinary dead at the end of the Egyptian civilization.
Even though the tomb still built the top of the hill, there was still fountain. But for me, as an archaeologist, the mummy is treasure.
In Saqqara, Salima's team prepares the mummy found in the Old Kingdom tomb of Kuwi for X-ray. They hope to learn more about the body to confirm if it could actually be the 4,400-year-old noble and one of the oldest Egyptian mummies ever found. But Mohammed has more evidence to bring to the case. High-class mummies had their organs removed to stop them from rotting. These were placed alongside the mummy in vessels called canopic jars. Mohammed found 4 of these right next to the mummy.
Ooh!
See?
They are beautiful.
They're very nice.
And it was sealed nicely.
It was sealed. All of them were sealed.
Ooh! Ooh! Look at that.
Yes.
Oh, I say.
We know for sure this is Old Kingdom, Salima.
The jars are Old
The jars
Kingdom.
are Old Kingdom.
Absolutely, I agree. 100% Old Kingdom.
Yes.
100%.
Yes.
Jars, Old Kingdom. Oh, you're kidding me. Okay. Trade.
Yes.
Oh, that is nice. You've got lots of bits of cloth, which is impregnated with resins or oils or whatever this black material is, black goo. Oh, how nice.
If the resin in the jars matches the resin on the mummy, it means they both date to the Old Kingdom. The mummy's exceptionally fine linen dressing could overturn decades of thinking and prove mummification techniques 4,000 years ago were much more advanced than first thought. But the cutting-edge chemical test that would prove it will take months. An X-ray could take them a step closer to confirmation that it is the Old Kingdom noble, Kuwi.
We'd wanted to be Hui so much. Imagine finding someone from the Old Kingdom in their own tomb. I mean, that's fantastic.
If Salima can establish the mummy's sex and social status, it could help prove its identity.
1.
She sends a pulse of X-rays through the mummified remains onto a photographic plate.
Yep, finished. Celebrate! Woo!
But with time running out on the permit, Salima's analysis depends on whether her images come out.
Now to the hard part.
As evening approaches in Saqqara, Salima hopes the X-rays she's taken might help flesh out a cleaner picture of the mummy from Kui's tomb and confirm it is male. To develop the images, she must delicately bathe the slides in a succession of chemicals.
It's really quite fabulous because you're sitting there with this blank sheet and then suddenly something appears by magic. Don't open yet.
She can't allow the film to be exposed to anything but dim red light.
I hope that's not too light.
The slides must be dipped for exactly the right time in each chemical bath. Any misjudgment, and the whole exercise has been a waste.
It's an adventure each time, but it's a one-shot deal, generally, and then there is the absolute terror that you won't get anything and it'll just be a blank sheet of film, which is horrifying.
Only when the last exposure has been fixed can Salima begin to assess her work.
Zainab, I think you could put on the light. This one looks totally blank. No, it's the vertebrae, thank God. What a relief. Oh my God. I thought we messed up one terribly. Oh God.
Hanging the plates up to dry, Salima and Mohammed can finally see under the skin of the mummy they hope is Kui.
Look at that.
Their first job is to confirm the mummy is the right sex.
Yeah.
And we are sure he is male?
Yep, he's a he. He's a he.
He's a he?
He is he.
A scan of his fragmentary spine provides more evidence. Growths on the vertebrae suggest the mummy's frame carried a lot of weight, a sure sign of nobility in the ancient world.
He was fat as well as big. So he was a tall man and a mashallah. It really fits with a nice burial.
For me, it looks like an old kingdom bones.
The X-rays aren't conclusive, but a well-mummified, well-fed man in the same archaeological layer as Old Kingdom jars is too much to ignore. This really could be Kui. If so, experts will be forced to rethink how advanced mummification was in Egypt's most ancient era.
It is the only mummy that was found in this tomb. It should belong to the tomb owner. Of course, the style of mummification is something we haven't seen for the Old Kingdom before, but there's always a first time. This is
Yes.
pretty cool.
We found a very high-class tomb, and inside this high-class tomb, we found a very high-class mummification body. I think they match together. I think if it's really Kui, this is a breakthrough in the ancient Egyptian history.
The story of the rise of the mummy may need to be rewritten. Outside Fayum, at the necropolis of ancient Philadelphia, Bassem has gathered his most experienced team members in the analysis tent. The body in this coffin could tell Bassem what happened to mummification when the Greeks conquered Egypt.
What we are going to do is we are going to clean it with soft brushes, and then we will try to lift up the cover of the coffin. The point is it's very risky. There are a big crack on top of the coffin, so hopefully we can do it in a good way, inshallah.
The team removes the dust from the coffin edges. It means their fingers are less likely to slip as they lever off the lid.
Are you ready to open? يلا بالراحة خالص. بسم الله. ايه ده؟ Wow. It's my first time to see something like this. I don't remember that I have ever seen it in one of the museums. It's amazing. It's I'm just speechless.
Inside the coffin is a small skeleton in a basic wrapping, but also a statue. The artwork shows a goddess in Greek terracotta. But the practice of placing a figurine in the coffin is purely Egyptian.
It's an influence between the Egyptian mindset and the Greek myth and mindset. So here we could see how both ethnic groups influence each other.
Anthropologist Abdallah examines the body.
We have a female skull, one female skull, it's kept with hair.
The skeleton is a young girl, and she bears clear evidence of mummification.
And then we have also the wrapping. And what is interesting for us is that the coffin from outside is Greek, but then they started to learn from Egyptian how to do wrapping and starting mummification. I've never seen something like this before. Never seen something like this before.
The remnants of hair and skin on the mummy show that 100 years after the Greeks conquered Egypt, they had begun to change their own sacred burial practices and adopted Egyptian ones, including mummification.
Within these burials and mummies, there is a lot of emotions. There is a lot of feelings. Beloved people, beloved families, you can hear their voice, you can see their faces. From this site, you can understand how strong this culture was. Ancient Egyptians invented and pioneered the embalming and the mummification, and the Greeks adopted the same tradition.
With every new body archaeologists unearth, the story of the mummies of Egypt becomes clearer. Inspired by corpses preserved by chance in the desert sand, embalmers in the age of the pyramids refined techniques to freeze the body in time. For 3,000 years, the practice evolved and spread. The myth and magic of the mummy was potent enough to enchant even the invading Greeks. All were intent on resurrection and the glories of the afterlife.
We are ready to go inside the tomb. Oh my God, wow.
In a newly opened 3,000-year-old tomb, archaeologists investigate the last mystery of the boy king, Tutankhamun.
A lot of human remains, a lot of skeleton. I need more light. Oh my God. Skulls everywhere. Wow. Looks like could be a mummy.
The Valley of the Kings, an ancient desert necropolis, and in the 2nd millennium BC, the final resting place of the pharaohs of Egypt's new kingdom. Here, 100 years ago, archaeologists made one of their greatest discoveries ever. They found the most spectacular treasures ever recovered from one of the most alluring civilizations in human history. The lost tomb of Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun became Egypt's pharaoh at just 9 years old. He died only 10 years later. The boy king and the treasures buried with him made headlines around the world. But compared to other pharaohs' tombs, Tutankhamun's burial chamber is small and poorly decorated. Why is he buried in such uninspiring surroundings? What could it reveal about his life? Now, at sites across Egypt, we follow teams of archaeologists and investigators working to unlock Tutankhamun's last mystery.
Wow. Whoa.
Egyptologist Aliyah Ismail has worked in the Valley of the Kings since 2014. At just 30, she leads a team of fellow Egyptians who, for the first time ever, are digitally reconstructing the valley's tombs and recording them for posterity. They're searching for clues to how King Tutankhamun's tomb was built that might explain the mystery of his strange burial.
This tomb is very small, and you notice that once you get in. Also, the figures, they look very different from other tombs in the valley. They're almost like child's drawing. Immediately, I can understand that there's something wrong with this tomb.
Deep inside the Valley of the Kings, tunnels burrow deep into the rock. In the largest tomb, there are more than 100 chambers. In the center of the valley lies the most famous tomb of all, the tomb of Tutankhamun. It was discovered full of treasures and with a coffin made of over 240 pounds of solid gold. But all this was packed into just 4 tiny rooms. Archaeologists have studied the tomb for a century, but it still hasn't given up all its secrets.
There's certainly something not right about this tomb. It's very different from other tombs in the Valley of the Kings.
To better understand the strangeness of Tutankhamun's tomb, Aliyah compares it to a tomb created less than 50 years after Tutankhamun's burial, the tomb of Seti I. Seti's tomb has 10 rooms compared to Tutankhamun's 4. Most of these rooms were likely full of treasures. They are still lined with stunningly carved and painted reliefs. It's spectacular compared to Tutankhamun's.
Here you can see so much work, so much effort has been put into making this tomb what it is today.
Aliyah uses the world's most precise 3D scanner to map the walls of Seti's tomb. She compares her results to the scans the team have already made of Tutankhamun's tomb. The scans allow Aliyah to analyze the tomb's carvings and paintings and compare the level of craftsmanship at work in each. The comparison could reveal crucial information about Tutankhamun's last days and may explain why he ended up in such a tiny and poorly decorated tomb.
We're trying to get all the little details that one wouldn't see with their eyes out into the scanners.
What lost details will Aliyah's scans reveal? Can they explain the mystery of Tutankhamun's tomb? In Gebel El Silsila, Swedish archaeologist Maria Nilsson and her British husband, archaeologist John Ward, are heading out to a dig for the first time since the global COVID pandemic forced them off-site.
It's going to be an amazing day today.
I expect the same.
Maria and John are picking up where they left off. They're following the lead of a 120-year-old archaeological report that briefly mentions a now lost temple. The report doesn't describe the temple itself, but it does describe its location, claiming that it once stood on the Nile's west bank, where the quarry workers' village lies. When they were last here, Maria and John dated the quarry workers' village to the reign of Tutankhamun, and they suspect he built the lost temple too. They are now searching for evidence that could back up their hunch. To get to their dig, they must cross the Nile. The team's effort to board their boat bright and early didn't go quite as quickly as planned.
It's one of those usual mornings when we go over to Tut's village, it's always chaos because we've got to get everything on the boat
The
first.
first day is always chaos because you need to move all the equipment.
Yeah. All right, guys, Yelena.
Shukran.
On the west bank of the Nile, the team makes the tough hike across open country toward the workers' village.
There's nothing easy about going up this hill.
Once there, Maria searches out Tutankhamun's inscription.
So we know that this is the name of Tutankhamun based on the combination of hieroglyphs that you have here.
There's lots of evidence of Tutankhamun in this quarry workers' village.
Considering that we have Tutankhamun here, we have it in the workers' village, we do have a hunch that the temple was also constructed by Tutankhamun.
Before they set off to search for any ruins, John and Maria check their bearings. From here onward, everything they excavate is in archaeologically uncharted territory.
If Tut's village is here, and then our wadi is in here.
So we believe that the temple is somewhere in this
Somewhere in that area. Go on, come.
This is exciting.
It is
We're
indeed.
finally here.
Finally.
The team gets to work searching the landscape. They scan the surface material, hunting for evidence that the lost temple stood here.
I want them to start from that big stone. Yep. And I want them to sweep as a line, taking in that edge, and then we work our way up. Okay? But they have to look at every single stone.
A meticulous search across the valley floor eventually delivers a result. Team foreman Ahmed Mansour brings over something special.
What you got?
Oh, yeah. Yes!
In Luxor, behind the Valley of the Kings, lies the sprawling necropolis of As-Sassif, an ancient burial ground for the elite nobles who served the pharaohs. Egyptian archaeologist Ez El-Nobi and his team are excavating a giant tomb with an impressive pillared entrance. Ez was fascinated by ancient Egypt as a boy and has spent his entire adult life excavating the tombs here at As-Sassif.
We hope it's intact tomb. Inshallah, we hope.
Can this huge tomb shed light on the mystery of Tutankhamun's tomb and help reveal why it lacks the usual majesty?
But till now, we don't know the name of the owner. May have a job like a scribe or a priest or high priest or vizier. Who knows?
The workers labor beneath a hot desert sun to haul each 10-pound bucket of sand up and out of the 20-foot deep tomb courtyard. But soon, the team uncovers a clue.
They find the little rope. We don't know the function of the rope. This may be part of bandages of mummy.
The rope looks good as new, but it's over 2,500 years old. It's a big clue that inside the tomb, there may be ancient mummies. Ever since Tutankhamun's treasures were discovered, unopened tombs have been a holy grail for archaeologists. As his team clears away sand to open up this tomb's entrance, expectations are high that there are treasures inside. As they dig, they uncover more and more pieces of fabric and bone. The sheer quantity of finds is a good sign.
They found some linen bandages, raw bandages, I think. Yeah, we have human bones, linen, robes.
The number of artifacts coming out of the sand suggests that this is a very large tomb. Debris like this is strong evidence it was raided in the past. To drop this much material on their way out, tomb raiders must have found a significant hoard inside.
I think we will have more than one mummy because we have many kind of linen, different colors and different fabric.
The team works all morning to clear sand from the tomb's entrance. Finally, there's enough room for Ez to take a peek.
Wow, I am very excited. I want to know what's inside. Wow, my God, it is a very big hallway.
At Saqqara, Egyptian archaeologist Ola El Alguizi is also trying to unearth a lost tomb. Ola is looking for new evidence to understand how tombs were built in Egypt in the generations that followed Tutankhamun. That evidence might shed light on the mystery of Tutankhamun's own tomb. Ola has been studying Egypt's tombs since the 1970s, when she became fascinated with decoding and understanding ancient hieroglyphs.
We are expecting to find something important, so we are waiting in suspense, yes.
3 years ago, Ola discovered an intriguing limestone lintel here, with the name engraved into it, Ta Muya. Her investigations reveal this figure was born into a military family. He lived just 50 years after Tutankhamun.
What we found in this whole area are military men. This habit of getting military buried here has begun since the time of Tutankhamun.
Ola directs her team to search for the tomb's entrance, near where she found the lintel. Soon, white limestone blocks emerge from beneath the sand.
Oh, I can see hieroglyphic text here, a wall. Oh my God, so nice.
To be sure this is the entrance to Ta Muya's lost tomb, Ola investigates the ancient inscriptions.
The great overseer of the stables in the temple of King of Upper and Lower Egypt, and then the name of the deceased, Ta Muya.
The hieroglyphs confirm this is the entrance to Ta Muya's tomb. Now, Ola's team must excavate further. They have to dig through several tons of sand and hope the tomb and its treasures are intact after 3,300 years. Just inside the tomb's entrance, they reveal something extraordinary.
You found something?
A beautiful painted artwork on plaster.
Wow. Yes. Whoa, 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 whoa.
At Gebel El Silsila, near a quarry workers' village on the west bank of the Nile, Maria and John's search for evidence of a temple that may have been built by Tutankhamun unearths a precious clue.
That is gorgeous.
Oh, isn't that beautiful?
Oh, it's a typical Amana wear.
Look at the lotus.
This pottery is so typical for what we know as the Amarna period. So from Amenhotep III through to Tutankhamun.
The pottery shard is painted with blue lotus flowers, a typical motif from the time of Tutankhamun. This find confirms that the old reports of some kind of permanent settlement here are accurate, and that this settlement dates to the era of the Boy King.
It's easy to imagine that this was once part of a massive water vessel that once stood in the courtyard of the temple, that once stood in this wadi. And for us, that is a beautiful piece of datable material.
To find conclusive evidence that a temple once stood here, the team starts the first of several trenches. If they can find pieces of an ancient wall, it will be a significant clue that a large structure once stood here. As the workers remove the top levels of sand, they make another discovery.
Amazing! I love you. Where? Fen, where did you find it?
It's a piece of worked sandstone.
It's small, but that's just made my day. That is from the interior of the structure, whether that be a temple, kiosk, shrine, whatever it was. It has plaster and then painted inscription, relief over the top.
The team finds more and more pieces of dressed stone in the trenches and among the surface scatter.
This proves that there was something here that was more substantial.
The dressed stone is evidence that the team could have found Tutankhamun's temple.
You know, no one's ever documented this temple, and we're the first ones to do it. And to me, that's just amazing. It's awesome.
Less than a mile from Tutankhamun's tomb in the Valley of the Kings, Ez is preparing to enter a tomb he has just opened. The discoveries awaiting Ez inside may have lain unseen by human eyes for nearly 3,000 years. By the end of the first workday, the tomb's entrance is completely clear.
We are ready to go inside the tomb. Oh my God. Wow. A lot of human remains, a lot of skeleton. I need more light. Oh my God. Skulls everywhere. To the hundreds of skulls, hundreds of human remains. It is very big discovery. The biggest discovery for my career.
Today's discovery is a once-in-a-lifetime find. It's instantly clear that the tomb is far bigger than the burial chamber in Tutankhamun's tomb, and doorways lead off to more rooms. To discover who this tomb was built for, Ez must investigate the far end of the chamber. To get there, the team must remove each of the 100-plus bones littering the floor. It's likely that these are the bones of many generations of the same family.
We have to work carefully with the bones because it's so fragile.
With clear access, Ez finds further passageways leading off the main hall and a false door. A false door is a door frame carved into solid stone. Those buried here believed their souls would pass through this and into the afterlife.
It is a very big tomb, a lot of room, a lot of bones.
The false door often carries inscriptions identifying the tomb owner, but here there's no evidence of their identity.
No inscription. For this, I can't tell the name of the owner of the tomb.
For a moment, it looks like the tomb may have revealed all of its secrets. But in the corner, Ez spots a mysterious shape under the sand.
Wow. Looks like could be a mummy.
Ez's team works quickly to free the mummy from millennia of dust.
I think maybe the owner of the tomb or one of his family. Ya Ahmad, please come.
Now, the team must move the mummy to the site's conservation area. Ahmed Mohammed, the team's conservator, prepares the linen to stop it from disintegrating.
كله تمام؟ ممكن تطلع ممكن تطلع؟
Workers face a tough challenge to maneuver the mummy out of the tomb and up a flimsy scaffold to the top of the 20-foot deep courtyard. The operation is fraught with danger for both the work crew and the mummy.
اطلع لفوق اطلع لفوق اطلع لفوق لا قبل لا قبل فين بس الصلاة على النبي
صلاة على النبي.
The workers deliver the mummy to the restoration team without it or them coming to any harm. Analysis of the mummy will help the team uncover this tomb's lost secrets. Why did a servant of the pharaohs get a bigger tomb than Tutankhamun himself?
I am very, very happy. We found tombs, we found mummies, we found big number of human remains, but still a lot of work ahead.
Mummification was practiced for 3,000 years of Egyptian history on pharaohs like Tutankhamun and their servants buried here. They believed it preserved the body for the afterlife. Belief in this afterlife was constant and unshakable, except for one brief and shocking moment in Egyptian history when the pharaoh's faith in eternal life vanished. It was a revolution that shaped Tutankhamun's short life. Did it also shape his mysterious tomb? At Gebel El Silsila, Maria and John have found evidence of a building on the valley floor. Their finds suggest the structure could be a temple dating to the time of King Tutankhamun.
This little shard, this little fragment, is all that I have left at this present moment of what was once a highly decorated temple situated somewhere in this wadi.
Maria and John will continue their investigation, but another mystery here could help explain Tutankhamun's tomb and the religious revolution that surrounded his life. Previous generations of pharaohs, including Tutankhamun's father, built on the east bank of the Nile. But strangely, Tutankhamun quarried and built on the west bank.
When we look at the reasons why Tutankhamun had his quarries on the west bank, we do think that it has a strong link with the priesthood, the priesthood of God Amun, and that they wanted to see him with a fresh start.
Tutankhamun's powerful high priests wanted a fresh start because they were fighting for their survival. When Tutankhamun's father, Akhenaten, became pharaoh, he led a revolution that transformed Egyptian religion. He abandoned sacred temples, and he banned belief in the old gods and the afterlife. He replaced them with a single god, the Aten. Akhenaten built a new capital, Amarna, abandoning the traditional home of the pharaohs at Thebes. When Akhenaten died, Tutankhamun faced a choice: carry on his father's unpopular religious revolution, or restore the old gods to their temples and their priests.
Tutankhamun's father, Akhenaten, not only did he close the temples and reduce the pantheon of gods down to just one, the Aten, he created a chaotic system, which unfortunately Tutankhamun inherited.
Tutankhamun's father, as a self-proclaimed god on earth, declared that he alone could communicate with the sun god, Aten. Neither the high priests nor Egypt's nobles were happy. When the boy king, Tutankhamun, came to the throne, many of his most important advisors demanded he reverse his father's revolution.
Tutankhamun was a young pharaoh, and he would have relied heavily upon his advisors and the court around him.
Tutankhamun agreed to return to the old ways. He quarried and built on the opposite bank of the Nile to his father to make clear his opposition to his father's reforms.
I think he was able to, in his short reign, re-establish the power of Egypt. Tutankhamun was able to revive Egypt like a phoenix out of the chaos that his father had left behind.
Did Tutankhamun's counter-revolution succeed? And can this decisive moment in Egyptian history explain the mystery of his unimpressive tomb? Just 4 miles from Luxor in the Valley of the Kings, Aliyah and her team are using a 3D scanner to investigate the tombs of Tutankhamun and Pharaoh Seti I. Seti is buried in a majestic 10-room tomb. Tutankhamun's 4-room tomb is so small, it hardly seems fit for a pharaoh. At the team's headquarters, Aliyah compares the scan results to reveal hidden details in each tomb's wall decorations and investigates if they are connected to the religious revolution that shaped Tutankhamun's reign.
So this is our lab where the magic happens.
Aliyah puts the scans of each tomb side by side and investigates.
The difference between Seti and Tut is visible. Seti's tomb, it has so many carved details. It's so intricately done and very special. But however, when we're going to Tut's tomb, it's just plaster and paint.
Her 3D scans reveal unique and unprecedented details. So, Aliyah can see a remarkable flaw in Tutankhamun's tomb.
When you zoom in, you can have a look at the faint outline of the brush marks. It's obvious that the plaster was still wet when they started painting over it.
The brush marks point to an extraordinary theory.
It seems that somebody wanted to rush Tutankhamun's burial. Clearly, someone wanted to close the tomb doors quickly, not even waiting for the plaster to dry before applying the paint.
The rush to finish Tutankhamun's tomb adds to the mystery of its small size. Who was responsible for leaving the boy king in this underwhelming tomb? Was it revenge for his father's revolution? Inside King Tutankhamun's tiny tomb, Aliyah continues her investigation.
There's certainly something not right about this tomb.
A crucial clue to the identity of the person who buried Tutankhamun in this unworthy tomb rests with a puzzling portrait painted onto the tomb walls. Before Tutankhamun's body was taken down into his tomb, a figure dressed in leopard skin performed a sacred ritual. He touched a serpent-headed blade to the eyes and lips of Tutankhamun, believing it allowed the dead pharaoh's soul to see and breathe. His spirit could now take part in a feast with his mourners, sustenance for the journey that they believed Tutankhamun would make into the afterlife. It was a ritual traditionally performed by the heir to the throne. Was the leopard-skinned figure also responsible for Tutankhamun's tomb? Aliyah travels to the nearby Valley of the Monkeys to investigate the mysterious man.
This tomb is the tomb of I. This is my first time here.
I is the man who is depicted guiding Tutankhamun's soul to the afterlife on the walls of Tutankhamun's tomb. He was possibly the father of Tutankhamun's stepmother, Nefertiti, and a trusted advisor to the boy king throughout his reign.
It's amazing how the background color is yellow, which is the same as Tut's tomb. And the drawing style is also the same. The same opening of the mouth scene exists in Tut. Also, there's no carving. The wall is just plaster and paint. It's almost like the same person did the two tombs.
Tutankhamun died young, with no heirs. His premature death led to a power struggle among those with a claim to become the next pharaoh. Was I and his battle to become king responsible for Tutankhamun's strange burial? At Saqqara, Ola's team of archaeologists is searching for the tomb of a man called Ta Muya. He was an important aide to the pharaoh who ruled Egypt 50 years after Tutankhamun's death. Tutankhamun was intent on reversing his father's religious revolution. Did his plan succeed? Ola's Egyptian colleague, Tariq Tawfiq, spots a piece of intriguing evidence.
Ta Muya and his wife on limestone. This is good news.
And I think I will have the name of the wife now. Merit F, his beloved. And then this is supposed to be her name, Tubi.
Carved reliefs of Ta Muya and his wife, Tubi, fill the tomb walls.
We have the deceased and his wife, and they are going and being received by a god. And it's not Osiris, and it's not Tah. So, who was it? Atum, maybe?
This is significant, religiously significant.
The reliefs depict the couple's journey to heaven and their eternal life in paradise. Similar scenes adorn the walls of Tutankhamun's tomb. Ancient Egyptians, just 50 years after the death of Tutankhamun, still believed that carvings like these on tomb walls magically transformed the afterlife into reality. But to which gods were these paintings and reliefs dedicated? Who did the Egyptians worship now after Tutankhamun's death? And what does it mean for the mystery of his tomb? Tariq and Ola continue their excavations. They could shed light on whether ancient Egyptians still worshiped the sun god Aten, as demanded by Tutankhamun's father, or had they returned to the older pantheon of gods? On site, the workers continue to search for this tomb's burial chamber.
It's always exciting. Sometimes there is even between the workmen a bit of a competition. Who will find first?
While conservators move the painted walls to the storerooms for safekeeping, Tariq spots something in the sand.
We have a pillar, and I can see already there is a jet pillar decorated on it.
It's an important find. This pillar confirms the nature of ancient Egyptian religious beliefs in the years after the Amarna Revolution and Tutankhamun's death.
This is exciting. The deceased is appearing now as he would have been carrying the jet pillar.
The Djed symbol represents the god Osiris, who arose from the dead to live again as king of the afterlife. Ancient Egyptians painted the symbol on the bottom of coffins and wrapped the mummy with Djed amulets to summon Osiris and rejuvenate the soul of the deceased. They also carved Djed symbols onto the pillars in their tombs to follow Osiris to the afterlife.
In the time of Amarna, they told them that there is no afterlife. After there was a reaction, an extreme worshipping Osiris.
The team has found inscriptions to Osiris and Ptah, gods whose worship Tutankhamun's father had forbidden. It's more evidence Tutankhamun had abandoned his father's revolution. He had restored belief in the afterlife and the power of all Egypt's gods. The religious revolution, demanding the worship of a single sun god, was over. This was a feat that deserved a magnificent burial and a majestic tomb. So why didn't Tutankhamun's mummy get the tomb it deserved? In the Valley of the Kings, Aliyah is investigating this mystery. Why did I banish Tutankhamun to such a small and poorly decorated tomb? Aliyah examines Ai's tomb to look for clues.
That's the baboon wall. Both Tut and I opted for the same scene, almost like the same person chose what goes in each tomb.
The uncanny similarities between the two chambers suggest a common hand was at work on both, but only Ai's tomb was fit for a pharaoh.
It's very similar to the tomb of Tutankhamun. The style, the artwork, the sarcophagus, but it's so much bigger.
The artistic style of the two tombs suggests that Ai may have been responsible for decorating both. Investigators now suspect that when Tutankhamun died unexpectedly young, the lavish tomb he ordered for himself was not finished. Ai seized the moment. He ordered Tut be buried in a smaller tomb. It was quickly decorated and sealed before the paint had a chance to dry. With Tutankhamun gone And before any challengers could oppose him, I crowned himself pharaoh and decreed that when he died, he would take Tutankhamun's tomb.
I buried Tutankhamun in the smaller tomb so he could have the bigger tomb for himself. This is the tomb that was intended for Tutankhamun, the tomb of I.
I banished Tutankhamun to an unworthy tomb to secure his place as pharaoh. Later pharaohs erased Tutankhamun from history, smearing his name as the son of a heretic. But 100 years ago, when his tomb was discovered, Tutankhamun was reborn a superstar. Now, experts use the clues to piece together his true legacy. As a boy king, dealing with the aftermath of his father's religious revolution, Tutankhamun navigated a royal court in turmoil. But heeding the advice of his most trusted advisors, he reinstated the priesthood, he rebuilt Egypt's temples, and he replaced the sun god Aten with the Egyptian gods of old. After his father's years of misrule, the reign of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun saw Egypt restored to greatness. In Egypt's ancient sandstone quarries, archaeologists search for traces of mighty pharaohs. The Holy Grail is hieroglyphs that shed light on the mysterious kings who built the pyramids.
We got pyramids.
Oh!
Oh, this is wonderful.
Look at that.
The Pyramids of Giza, ancient Egypt's most iconic monuments. Egyptian civilization spanned nearly 3,000 years. But their great age of pyramid building lasted just over 4 centuries. Some 20 huge pyramids date from this time, concentrated on the desert plateaus of the Nile's west bank, each built to house the body of a mighty pharaoh. Now, archaeologists across Egypt are trying to unlock the secrets of who these mysterious kings were, how they persuaded the people of Egypt to build their giant monuments, and how they influenced pharaohs for thousands of years after they died. 30 years ago, American Egyptologist Steve Harvey excavated the very last pyramid built by an Egyptian king. He has spent a career exploring these royal monuments. Today, he's come to the most famous one of all, to investigate the legendary pharaoh who built it 4,500 years ago.
The Great Pyramid of Khufu here at Giza is the culmination of hundreds of years of trial and error in pyramid building. But it's not only the perfect shape, it's the largest ever built, and it's never surpassed.
The Great Pyramid was a fortress designed to protect the pharaoh's tomb. 24 feet off-center, the entrance would have been tricky to find. At the top of the 130-foot passage, a pulley system of ropes dropped 3 enormous granite slabs, sealing off the entrance to the burial chamber. Next, 3 giant blocks slid down the shaft, closing off a grand staircase. This pyramid was a masterpiece of engineering. Capped with a layer of flawless white limestone, it was an unmistakable symbol of the pharaoh's supreme authority. The Great Pyramid was one of the first true pyramids ever built. None of the Pyramid Age kings that followed Khufu would match it. The incredible scale of this tomb suggests Khufu wielded remarkable power, but very little is known about the king himself. Steve has been granted special access to explore the restricted areas inside the pyramid, to hunt for any clues to the life and death of this mysterious pharaoh.
I'm gonna have to stop for a minute, guys. It really is getting dark. Hard to see anything. It's not meant for coming and going, that's for sure.
Steve heads to the king's burial chamber at the very heart of the pyramid. There, mourners laid the pharaoh's body for his eternal rest, tightly secured behind giant rock barriers. The chamber is almost entirely bare.
Even though this space was protected by blocking, it was completely robbed out. And when archaeologists came to the sarcophagus, they found nothing inside.
For Steve, evidence of the king himself survives in the only thing that does remain, the chamber walls.
What really excites me is that you can see this incredible granite that's been smoothed to a very high degree, and this one block is something like 100 tons, brought all the way from Aswan. This is an exotic stone, it's not the natural limestone. So really we have this amazing box within this huge mountain of limestone.
Ancient quarrymen cut the precious granite in Upper Egypt, then floated it 600 miles down the Nile. Khufu spared no expense to ensure his resurrection to the afterlife, not as a mortal, but as a god. Steve heads deeper into the pyramid in search of a closed-off second chamber. Legend has it, Khufu built this to hold his soul. On the other side of the necropolis, archaeologist John Ward has come to Giza to explore the monuments of Khufu's dynasty. He's spent a decade unearthing the stonework of New Kingdom pharaohs who lived 1,000 years after the Pyramid Age ended.
Watch your toes, guys, watch your toes.
His discoveries include an 11-foot-tall Sphinx statue, a representation of a god with the body of a lion, an animal revered by Egyptians as a symbol of strength. It echoes the famous giant sculpture guarding the Giza pyramids. John wants to know what was so special about these kings that pharaohs 1,000 years later still mimicked their statues.
These iconic monuments are just shouting, screaming at us. Power, dominance, control. I feel so insignificant. Together, these pyramids and the Sphinx and the temples create a landscape of power.
The huge sculpture protects the necropolis, a giant symbol of supremacy believed by many to have the face of Khufu's son, Khafra, owner of Giza's second largest pyramid. Despite many visits here, John has never been up close. Today, he's been granted special access to explore its enclosure.
It's absolutely inspiring. I mean, it's just jaw-dropping. I've waited 50 years to be here, and now I'm here. It's just wow.
66 feet high, the Sphinx gazes east toward the rising sun.
I know what it's like to work with the living rock and how to carve it. This would have been a monumental challenge. They only had copper chisels, wooden mallets. It would have been a harsh environment. This dust would have been everywhere. And yet, the workmen, the craftsmen, the masons, they were all willing participants, loyal to Pharaoh.
It would have taken thousands of people decades to construct the epic monuments of Giza. But there's no evidence the pharaohs enslaved people to build them. They didn't draw their power over the people from force. John believes what stood these kings apart was that they inspired devotion.
The sheer volume of stone has gone into building this, and each individual block represents the loyalty that they had for Pharaoh.
The huge monuments of Giza represent the peak of the Pyramid Age. So why was nothing built on this scale again? At the height of Khufu's reign, reliable seasonal rains fed the crops that ensured Egypt's prosperity. For 3 months every year, the Nile flooded and inundated the farmland, so farmers couldn't work the fields. The farmers were free to help build the king's enormous tomb. They believed he kept the gods content and the country fed. But soon after Khufu completed his pyramid, Egypt began to suffer drought. As crop yields crashed, so did the taxes coming into the state's treasuries. And despite the free labor, the Giza monuments almost bankrupted Egypt. The people's loyalty began to falter. The king's tombs that followed got smaller, while Khufu's Great Pyramid remained, dominating the Nile's west bank.
The sheer power that he held is absolutely unbelievable.
It was a power his struggling successors were desperate to replicate. At Abu Ghurab, Italian archaeologist Massimiliano Nazzolo wants to know how the kings of the Pyramid Age held on to power as their wealth and status declined. He spent his entire career trying to understand a very different monumental structure, an enigma whose mysteries captured his imagination in his very first student course in Egyptology. This enormous scatter of ancient rubble was once a sun temple dedicated to the most powerful god of the Pyramid Age.
Each king wanted a pyramid for achieving his resurrection, but this was not enough for the 5th dynasty kings. They wanted something more. The king built this place to turn himself into a god, the sun god.
The pharaoh Nusera didn't just want to become divine in death. He built this temple because he wanted to be worshipped as a god while he was still alive. Rising from the desert was an enormous obelisk, the centerpiece of the temple. It was not a traditional stone needle, but shaped more like a pyramid. Monumental walls enclosed it, creating a courtyard where people could come to worship the sun. The temple aligned perfectly on an east-west axis with the path of the sun. So on the summer solstice every year, the sun rose through the entrance, traveled directly over the obelisk, and set at the western end. This alignment is identical to that of the pyramids. Records suggest that 6 of the pharaohs who followed Khufu decided to build sun temples as well as their pyramids to underline their divine status to the people of Egypt. But almost all of these temples are lost.
We know that there were 6 sun temples, and we actually, so far, have discovered only 2.
Max hopes excavating this sun temple will shed light on these kings' power and perhaps help him crack one of the biggest mysteries in Egyptology, the location of the missing temples. The problem is, Max is not the first to decode this structure's secrets. Early Egyptologists excavated here more than 100 years ago and left a mess of archaeological confusion in their wake.
Well, this find is amazing because it's a cover of matches left by the archaeologists during their work.
Along with their discarded matchboxes, early 20th century excavators left 4,500-year-old pottery scattered across the site.
As you can see here, this area of the temple is full of potsherds. But unfortunately, this material is completely useless for us because it's out of a secure context, cannot tell us anything about the life of the temple.
If Max can find undisturbed artifacts, they might reveal clues the first archaeologists missed. Even the smallest of finds could be crucial in the hunt for the lost sun temples of the Pyramid Age. The team is excavating an area of the Sun Temple earlier archaeologists never touched. The missing Sun Temples could hold the secrets of how the later Pyramid Kings who followed Khufu held on to power. Their location remains one of Egyptology's greatest mysteries. Untouched pottery here in Abu Ghurab could help solve it. Mohammed Usman is a senior archaeologist here.
We think that we found a beer jar.
Weak beer was a major source of nutrition for ancient Egyptians, but they used the same ceramic containers in religious rituals.
If you put like this one, yeah, it fits.
This could be an offering made in worship of a pharaoh, or an ancient builder's discarded lunch. Even after 4,500 years, the answer could lie in its contents.
So it seems that it's not an actual beer jar. There was no actual beer inside. It was filled with mud to be used in rituals.
For ancient Egyptians, mud was a symbolic replacement for food, which they would offer to the gods. The jar is buried not far from a curious row of stone basins. Max and Mohammed believed they were all part of an elaborate ritual presided over by the pharaoh. Priests filled the stone basins with water, which flowed out across the temple's limestone floor along 28 shallow grooves. The sacred liquid washed over jars placed in the channels, purifying the offerings within. The priests brought the symbolic offerings to the altar and left them to be consecrated by the sun god's heat and light. They then climbed through a passage in the obelisk to emerge on the platform, facing east to bless the rising sun. The purification basins have survived 4,500 years intact, but the floor of Nusera's Sun Temple has disintegrated. Mohammed and the team explore underneath its fragmented remains. Just inches down, they find a mysterious layer.
What we have here is the foundation of the stone pavement of the stone temple. And beneath that, there is an older structure that used to be here. We still don't know when exactly, but it was built out of mud bricks.
Mohammed has found mud bricks in several places beneath the Sun Temple floor. It suggests a large building existed here before Nusera's temple was built. If they find evidence that the earlier mud brick structure was sacred, it could even be one of the missing sun temples of another king of the Pyramid Age. At Abu Sir, on a desolate plateau within sight of Max's dig, are the pyramids of the pharaohs who built the sun temples. Little more than a century after Khufu had built his Great Pyramid, the Egyptian state was weakened by drought. The later pharaoh's treasuries were emptied by the cost of the previous king's giant tombs.
We have in front of us a history of more than 2,000 years. And most of the secrets of this vast stretch of land remain still unlocked.
Czech archaeologist Miroslav Barta has spent 3 decades stripping back the sand from this necropolis. 20 years ago, he pioneered the study of the pyramids as viewed from space. Today, he's firmly on the ground, in search of the secrets that explain how the later kings of the Pyramid Age clung to power as their wealth and status drained away. On this spot in 2018, he discovered the tomb of a legendary wise man, Ka-Irsu. Ka-Irsu was a powerful royal court official and close advisor to one of the later Pyramid kings. As overseer of royal works, he designed the king's pyramid and the temples that brought the pharaoh closer to the gods. But he was also the head of the House of Life, a philosopher bringing the king's message to the people of Egypt. His writings preached the importance of complete loyalty to the pharaoh, a message that was still being repeated 1,000 years later. Miroslav is digging in the very heart of the cemetery in search of more elite tombs. He wants to know how much the later Pyramid kings relied on powerful officials like Ka-Irsu to improve their public relations and promote loyalty. Test pits have revealed a tomb right next to the pyramid of Neferikara, one of the later Pyramid kings. It could be exactly what he's looking for.
Only very important persons, most of them coming from the royal family, could be or had the privilege to be buried here.
After 3 weeks of digging, the team uncovers the exterior structure. But a crucial clue is missing. The walls are bare. Without inscriptions, Miroslav can't identify the tomb owner. If he's to uncover the secrets of the Pyramid King's power, Miroslav will have to dig deeper and find the burial chamber. Archaeologist John Ward has returned to the ancient quarry of Gebel El Silsila to join the director of the Swedish Archaeological Mission, his wife, Maria Nilsson. Last season, they excavated an incredible monument, a sphinx similar in form to the Great Sphinx at Giza. This year, Maria and John want to investigate the connection between the kings who built the mighty monuments at Giza and the pharaohs who carved out sphinxes 1,000 years later.
You're ready for some more fun, Carter?
They believe the site still hides stone monuments that could reveal the Great Pyramid King's impact on Egyptian history. A large pile of rock not far from last season's statue is exactly the right size to hide another sphinx. Today, they'll try to dig it up, but they're off to a slow start.
It's now coming up for 10 to 8, and I've got absolutely no men here.
Maria and John have just under 5 hours digging time to move hundreds of wheelbarrows full of stone.
My hypothesis is that we've got another sphinx underneath.
But the team cannot afford to rush as they dig out the mountain of loose rock.
It's unstable spoil, and if that came down on you, then you're just buried.
With time already against them, the operation is a fine balance between risk and reward.
Careful, boys, be careful.
Oh.
At Abu Sir, in between the pyramids, Miroslav's team has reached the bottom of the burial shaft. The chamber below could contain the body of a high-ranking member of a pharaoh's court. 2 years ago, he discovered the tomb of a wise man called Ka-Irsu, an official whose job was to promote loyalty to the king among the people of Egypt. But was Ka-Irsu an anomaly? Or did all the later kings of the Pyramid Age have a dedicated official helping them cling to power?
يا كشاف فين يا أسامة؟ أيوة. So here we are.
it's clear that ancient robbers have ransacked the Tomb of Treasures. But though the tomb's been looted, it may still contain evidence of how the Pyramid Kings held their power over Egypt, even as their wealth declined. The state of the sarcophagus confirms Miroslav's fears. The robbers did a thorough job.
They just set up fire on the corner of the lid, then splashed it with water so that the limestone started to break into pieces. Lifted the lid, grabbed the mummy, pulled it out, and searched it for small valuables. That's how he ended up his journey. Sad story.
The mummy may be destroyed, but Miroslav's team has alerted him to some faint red markings on the back of the sarcophagus. It's a crucial clue. It could be the one piece of information he needs to identify the owner.
So, here it is. The only clue is to his identity and social standing here.
Was he, like Ka-Irsu, an official propping up a weakened Pyramid King? The script is too degraded to read with the naked eye, but to an Egyptologist, the general message is clear.
Here we have the name, and we have the principal title.
A title means the man was important. He had a role in the pharaoh's court. But what? Miroslav can't brush the dust off the inscription in case the paint flakes away. Instead, he takes high-resolution photographs of every character.
We will use special filters and software filters. We do general shots, and then we do details.
Miroslav must now process the images and determine if enough detail survives to read the script. The signs are promising.
We are good, we are happy. We can have no doubts about the social standing of the guy.
This man was honored with a burial amongst the pharaohs. So could he have played a role in consolidating the ailing Pyramid King's power? To find out, Miroslav must decipher exactly what his titles were. In Abu Ghurab, Max and Mohammed's investigation has thrown up surprising evidence beneath Nusayra's Sun Temple. The mud brick structure below its foundations could help them find the lost sun temples built by the later Pyramid Kings. It's a delicate task. Just identifying the 4,500-year-old bricks relies on technique honed through years of experience.
Finding mud bricks is not an easy thing, as it is actually buried in the same material, the mud. So the archaeologist has to listen to the sound of the metal, because they really can recognize it only by listening to the throw. So it's an amazing thing, it's an amazing skill.
They've uncovered bricks all over the site. It suggests this older mud structure is far larger than expected. At the edge of the site, team foreman Reis Khalid makes a discovery.
Well, we are cleaning this area where we found a base of a column, which is pretty unexpected because it was never found before in the previous excavations.
It's a huge breakthrough. A column could be evidence that the mud brick structure had a grand entrance made of stone.
It's a really white, high quality of white limestone. That means, of course, that the building was quite impressive.
The column base goes down more than 2 feet, suggesting it must have supported a huge entrance arch.
I'm really excited because we knew that there was something below the stone temple of Nusayra, but we don't know now if it is just another building face of the same temple or if it is a new building. Actually, the fact that there is such a huge monumental entrance would point to a new building. So why not another Sun Temple, one of the missing 4 Sun Temples?
If there is a lost Sun Temple underneath Nusayra's Sun Temple, it would be a career-defining discovery for both Max and Mohammed.
This makes me
feel excited and also confused and a little bit frustrated because what I would like to do now is actually to dismantle the stone floor of New Sera and go down to the next level where I can find the rest of the architecture.
To prove the huge mud brick structure is one of the legendary lost sun temples of the later Pyramid Kings, they still need more evidence. On the Giza Plateau, Egyptologist Steve Harvey is trying to reach a mysterious second chamber in the heart of Pharaoh Khufu's Great Pyramid.
Oh, it's difficult.
He's hunting for clues to the mysterious king's life and death. But deep in the pyramid, the tunnels get tighter and more treacherous.
What happened there? ما فيش نور خالص. I guess the power went out.
In an ancient tunnel riddled with pits, the lack of light is a real threat.
The echo and the dark certainly really reinforce the fact you're in a hidden tomb.
At the bottom of a tunnel, little more than 3 feet square, Steve finds a second chamber.
It's extraordinary. Just huge ceiling with this vault. You almost feel the weight of millions of tons of stones above you.
Like Khufu's burial chamber, archaeologists found this room entirely bare. It was designed with a niche believed to hold the giant statue that housed Khufu's soul. Even this stood empty. But when archaeologists explored the finely polished walls, they found small, secret passages that led out from the chamber.
These are really interesting features, kind of mysterious features. They go all the way to the exterior of the pyramid and head up toward the sky. So what's most likely is that they have some kind of symbolic connection to the night sky and to the stars.
Ancient Egyptians were dedicated astronomers who religiously charted the movements of the night sky. Priests particularly revered 2 bright stars, ever present in the north, whose permanence they associated with eternal life. Khufu aligned his pyramid directly with these stars, believing that's where the gods resided. He may have built the shafts to allow his soul to rise to the heavens to join the ever-present stars and become a god. What still confounds archaeologists is the pharaoh's final mystery. He didn't leave a single inscription to celebrate his life.
They haven't decorated with images, they haven't put hieroglyphs on the wall, and that's a choice and a decision they made. And we have to think about why.
The greatest pyramid king left no lasting clue to his life except his giant monument. His plan was to put life behind him and become a god in death. The weaker pyramid kings who followed him needed the power of the gods in life. At Abu Ghurab, Max and Mohammed are uncovering a vast mud brick structure beneath the foundations of the Pharaoh Nusera's Sun Temple.
It might be small steps going up.
If it is one of the 4 legendary missing Sun Temples, it could help Max explain how the struggling Pyramid Kings held on to power as their status began to fade. But he needs evidence that the building was sacred. In the northeast corner of the mud brick structure, workers have unearthed an astonishing find.
This is a huge accumulation of beer jars that we found on the wall, on the main enclosure wall of the previous mud brick building, completely preserved.
They delicately brush the pottery to free the jars from the surrounding earth.
It's heavy and intact.
And full of mud.
Ancient priests used jars full of mud as ritual offerings. So these could be proof the structure was a sacred temple.
You think they were all deposited?
I think they were deposited and also very carefully laid. The deposit might reflect some respect to the older building that used to be here.
Even single ritual offerings in the foundations of such old buildings are incredibly rare. This is a huge cache.
Every time we remove a full jar, we found another one.
For Max, they're crucial. They show the mud brick building was a religious site.
Very exciting moment. Very exciting moment. I'm pretty sure that what we are excavating here is a previous sun temple on which Nusera built its own new sun temple.
By building on top of a previous king's temple, Nusera was making his sun temple all the more sacred. Max's decade-long search has finally borne fruit.
You have to imagine that a few years ago, when we arrived here for the first time, all this area was completely covered, nothing was visible. So I have now many proof that what we are excavating here is one of the lost sun temple.
It's a huge discovery and unlocks a new chapter in the story of the kings of the Pyramid Age. The pharaohs who followed Khufu were weak shadows of the man who built the Great Pyramid. But whichever king built this newly discovered sun temple did something Khufu did not. He ensured he was worshipped as the offspring of the sun god while he was still alive. His pyramid may not have rivaled Khufu's, but with his sun temple, he claimed the power of a living god. In the quarry at Gebel El Silsila, Maria and John are searching for a new Sphinx to match the statue they unearthed last season. They're trying to understand the link between the legendary pyramid kings of Giza and the pharaohs who ruled 1,000 years after.
As a symbol of power, the Sphinx is everything. And when I look at the Sphinx, I can put myself into the sandals of the craftsman chiseling this one away. And he did it for the love of Pharaoh.
John's team strips away the top of a rock pile beneath a quarried pillar of stone.
We're going to clear this area and level off. We'll keep on cutting into the sand because there's a lot of sand here.
The mound of spoil has a core of ancient sand. For John, it suggests the pile could hide another find, perhaps a sphinx.
What happens is when sand is blown in, as you can see now, the wind is blowing, coming from the north. And when it hits something, of course, it starts to build up and build up and build up, and that's what we've got here.
Just moments after exposing the sand beneath the spoil, the team hits something solid.
Yeah. It's always the sand. Wherever there's a sand build-up, you're always guaranteed there's something there.
The team delicately works around the chunk of stone. It could be a sphinx or a precious part of another monument.
One has to be patient. That's archaeology at the end of the day. We don't rush things. It's not a race. There's no reward for coming first.
Isn't it? We race to learn. Knowledge is the key.
In the field lab near the necropolis of Abu Sir, Miroslav's computer software has sharpened the script from the high official's tomb. The inscriptions should tell him the tomb owner's name and titles. If he played the same role as the wise man Ka-Irsu, it could prove he was not unique and that other kings of the Pyramid Age also depended on their officials to maintain the people's loyalty.
It's actually a great result because we have two very important titles of the owner, and we have his full name, so we can congratulate ourselves. We were extremely lucky. We have it. We have the full story.
In ancient Egypt, having a title meant power and sometimes access to the pharaoh.
The inscription opens with a very strange title, the one with wonderful arm. We understand what it says, but we have no idea simply what it meant, followed by another very important ranking title, in this case, Semerwati, the only friend or the sole friend of the king, and then the name, the personal name of the tomb owner, which reads as Kairos. Kairos.
For Miroslav, it's a highly significant combination. Not only was the tomb owner a close confidant of the Pyramid King, but his name is similar in form to the legendary wise man Ka-Irsu, whose teachings of loyalty to the pharaoh lasted 1,000 years. Miroslav believes the owner of the new tomb must be a direct descendant. If so, Ka-Irez may have had the same role in the royal court, spreading word of the pharaoh's power.
It's a very rare opportunity to really get in touch with somebody who was venerated for centuries, you know. Now we can say that we've got at least 2 generations of this famous sage. So this is quite a feat.
The pharaohs who followed Khufu may not have had his wealth, but they masterminded ways to bolster their fragile power. They used officials to promote loyalty, and they cast themselves as living gods. So what legacy did they leave to the pharaohs 1,000 years later? At Gebel El Silsila, just a few feet from an unfinished Sphinx statue, Maria and John's search for more buried monuments has turned up a stone embedded in wind-blown sand. They hope it will reveal clues to the legacy of the Pyramid Kings.
It's nicely in the sand, so the sand is always a nice indication.
The flat edges and sharp corners suggest it's not another Sphinx, but it could be something even better.
We got Hermes.
Oh!
An inscribed stone could reveal more about the pharaoh who carved the Sphinx out of this quarry.
Oh, this is wonderful.
Look at that.
Decorated with engravings, the block appears to be a missing piece of a monument John and Maria had been trying to piece together for nearly a decade. A shrine to the New Kingdom pharaoh who owned this quarry, Amenhotep III.
This really is beautiful. We've worked with this monument for years, and when you find a piece like this, it makes your heart go.
This is the crowning detail. It makes it all worth it. The sweat, the tears, the hassle.
As the crew begins the cleanup after 5 solid hours of digging in the sun, Maria and John begin to analyze their discovery.
Well, I have to say that with or without Sphinx, this has made my day. It says the great god, and then you got the son of Ra. It is a real statement that Amenhotep III was the living god.
The shrine stood above Amenhotep's quarry, proclaiming him an offspring of the sun god, exactly as the later Pyramid Kings had done to rescue their status as supreme rulers.
By claiming to be the great god and the son of Ra, the sun disk, Amenhotep III is following a tradition all the way back from the great pyramid builders. I love it.
It's a major part of the jigsaw. It's history. Wonderful.
By carving sphinxes and inscribing monuments with statements of divine power, Amenhotep III connected himself to his predecessors who claimed to be gods on Earth, the Pyramid Kings. Every season, archaeologists draw these ancient pharaohs further out from the shadows of history. Mysterious figures whose power rested not on force, but devotion. Their officials promoted loyalty through teachings that echoed down through the ages. And their temples helped cast them as divine descendants of the life-giving god of the sun. But 500 years after they built the first pyramids, Pyramid Age civilization collapsed. When Egypt rose again, the Pyramid Kings' extraordinary monuments remained, and their legacy inspired pharaohs 1,000 years later.